Ready? I'd like to call to order the May 8th meeting of the Saraville Planning Board. Madam Secretary, has this meeting been advertised in accordance with the Open Public Meeting Act?
Yes, it has.
Everybody please stand and join me in a pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Get a roll call, please.
Mr. Hakevich? Here. Councilman Delana?
Here.
Mr. Davis? Here. Mr. Kelly? Here. Ms. Lee? Mr. McEnone?
Present.
Ms. O'Leary? Here. Mr. Velosin?
Here.
Ms. Matilla? Here. Chairman Ty? Mr. Rogoff?
Here.
Mr. Cornell?
Here.
Mr. Leocavello?
Here.
We have a quorum.
We have one memorialization of a resolution, Counselor.
Yes, the first resolution on your agenda is really just to authorize hiring Gruel to perform and prepare the redevelopment plan, associated work to implement the redevelopment plan for the board this evening. That's really all it is, nothing more.
Okay, I need a motion for that resolution.
Make a motion, we accept the resolution.
Need a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Hakevich?
Yes.
Councilman Delana?
Yes.
Mr. Davis? Mr. Kelly? Mr. McEnone?
Yes.
Ms. O'Leary? Yes. Mr. Velosin?
Yes.
Ms. Matilla? Yes. Motion
Okay, everybody should have got a copy of the meeting minutes from April 10th. Anybody have any questions, comments, deletions on the minutes? If not, accept the motion to accept and file the minutes.
Make a motion, we accept the minutes.
Need a second?
Second.
Need a roll call for that, too, please.
Mr. Hakevich?
Yes.
Councilman Delana? Mr. Davis? Mr. Kelly? Mr. McEnone?
Yes.
Ms. O'Leary? Yes. Mr. Velosin? Ms. Matilla?
Okay, we have no communication agenda, so we'll start with the first site plan hearing.
Oh, just one comment, there's the North American Properties Riverton matter to discuss, and clarify the amendment to the redevelopment plan has been carried to the 15th, the meeting for the 15th.
Counselor?
Is she here?
Microphone?
Yeah, there's a microphone right there.
We want to get in.
Yeah, yeah.
I just contacted the expert about 10 minutes ago, and she said she was right around the corner. So hopefully she'll be here momentarily. She just took a look at the property, and she was on her way here. So my name is Bert Lundberg. I'm the attorney for the applicant before the board today on the estate of Leon Ott, OTT. The property address is 3221 Bordentown Avenue. I have my client here. She's the executrix of the estate of Leon Ott, who passed away. And hopefully my expert will be here momentarily.
Let's just take care of a few housekeeping issues. Picking me up? Excuse me. Just a few housekeeping issues. Please acknowledge your receipt of our professional staff reports, that being the report dated May 8, 2019 from CME Associates under signature of J. Cornell, report from our planner, John Leon Cavallo, dated May 6, 2019. Do you agree to stipulate to those reports, make them part of the record?
We do.
Do you agree to comply with the terms and conditions contained in those two reports?
We do.
Anything in there you can comply with?
No.
All right.
And our expert just sat down, so we're all ready.
Okay, carry on.
Okay, so originally I'd like to initially call my client. Here you go. Second one.
Hi,
Please state your name for the record.
Leona Ott Daniels.
I have to
And-
swear her in. And you want to raise your right hand? Swear the testimony you're about to give the board in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, and Ms. Daniels, excuse me. Your name is Leonia Daniels. Where do you live?
Florham Park, New Jersey.
Just talking to the mic.
Florham Park, New Jersey.
And you are the executrix of the estate of your father, Leon Ott?
Yes.
I have a copy of the certificate, executor certificate.
A1 in evidence.
Okay. Hand
Make it a
over.
part of the record,
Okay,
since that authorizes her to act on behalf of the property.
got you. Now, your father passed away when?
2013,
And your mother?
2001.
Okay, and you are the executrix?
Yes,
And the sole beneficiary
yes.
of the estate? I want to show you two deeds here which were part of the application. Are you familiar with these deeds? And are they the two lots that are in before the board right now?
Yes,
And you provided these to me, correct?
yes.
Okay, one is dated February 5 of 1960, and the other is dated August 12th of 1960 also. Is that correct?
Yes,
And I just want to present those to the board also.
They're two separate lots?
They are.
separate
So
deeds.
they've
Two
been-
separate
they're
deeds.
merged under common ownership?
Yes,
They're merged by operation of law?
yes,
I get it. So that's why they told you you need subdivision.
yes. That's why we're here. One was from Donald H. Campbell and Eunice B. Campbell. And the other one is from Russell Stanton Jr. and Bessie Jean Stanton, both to your mom and dad, correct?
To my mom and dad, yes.
Yes, by different sellers.
Right.
Okay, just want to put them over here for the record also. Want to show you this right here. Could you tell me what this is?
That's the water bill for 3221 where the house and garage reside on.
And there's only one home. The other lot is vacant?
The other lot is empty. It's a vacant lot.
And so there's no water bill?
There's no nothing.
Okay. Also over here?
You want to put that in evidence?
Yes.
All right, that's A2, right? Did I miss one?
1, 2,
The
3, 4.
the
Executive
executive
certificate
certificate's
was
A1,
A1. Then the two deeds were 2 and 3.
A2, and A3.
And then the water bill was A4.
Okay, A4, you got it.
Then I want to show you right here, what are these two documents?
Tax bills, one for each lot.
And you pay the taxes separately?
Yes,
Okay, and you've been doing that since your dad passed away as the executrix?
yes.
So this would be A4, no, A5 and 6. Now, you grew up in this house, correct?
Yes.
And when did you leave?
1993 when I got married.
Okay. And your parents lived there all those years?
Yes.
Okay. And could you tell me what your intention is if the board were to grant the variances and the minor subdivision?
To make them what they were supposed to be buildable lots when they purchased them. Over 50 years ago, they purchased what they thought were two building lots. They had two deeds, two tax bills, and then they had always told me as I was growing up, in the future, if you stay in the area, you can build a house next to us, and if your job or your intentions take you somewhere else, then you'll have two lots to sell and do as what you want with them later on. But they were buildable lots at the time. They were 75 foot wide, just like the houses on the left, just like the houses on the right also were. They were all the same size. The house, the one with the house and the garage is on, was 3221. The next lot didn't have anything on it, and then the following neighbor was 3225. So there was room for a separate address.
I have no further questions.
I'd like to ask your client, the vacant lot. Did you utilize the vacant lot for any purpose?
Utilize it for, it was always an empty lot. When I grew up, we had a pool on it, an above-ground pool on it. We never had anything, we never built anything on it. It was just always for extra space.
Is that an above-ground pool?
Above-ground pool, yeah.
Is it still there?
No, I was taken down
Yes.
when I wasn't using it anymore. And then also before my dad passed, like I said, he was always under the impression that there were buildable lots. Before he passed, they brought the sewers in the area, and he said, you make sure that you have a separate hookup for each lot because they were separate. So after he passed, I had someone that was interested in the empty lot, and I said, okay, I said, go to the borough, make sure you can do what you want to do, and then we'll talk, and he called the borough, and he said, no, it's not a buildable lot, and I said, what? And I called, and they told me that there was a change in the ordinance over the years, and we had never been notified or known about it, and then I was told if I want to have
You mean
them
the
as-
change in the lot width?
Excuse me?
You mean the change in the minimum
Yes,
lot width?
right. We didn't know there was anything that had changed. And then I called and asked, well, what do I do? And he said, if you want to have them as buildable lots, you need to do a minor subdivision. So that's why I'm here, and figured that way if somebody else can have the lot and build on it, they can live in the same area that I grew up in and enjoy the town.
So,
Okay, so we're really here for the minor subdivision and the two variances. So with that being said, thank you for your testimony.
well, you have a minimum side yard setback as well.
Yes.
There's three. There's two lot width, one side yard.
Yes.
What's the name of So the 4.40, you say is not applicable. That one.
That's on the new existing lot. Proposed lot. No development. Existing lot, there's a garage. That's been flooded.
Okay.
That's why.
We'll see. It's no side yard because there's no building there.
That's fine.
Okay. Well, let me
Okay.
just say this about that.
No, well, they do have it.
I understand it's an existing condition. The 4.4 feet side yard, okay, is technically a deficiency. So your proofs should include, unless you can tell me standing here today that you received a variance for the deficient lot width, lot side yard, you should ask for it today. Because you don't get it automatically just because it's pre-existing, because once the subdivision comes before us, we can take a look at all the deficiencies, including those that existed but were not granted.
Understood.
Understood, Mr. Rogov. I'm happy to provide testimony
How are you?
as such. I'm well, and yourself?
Good. Want to raise your right hand? You swear testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, I do. Christine Nazaro Cafone, licensed professional planner. I've testified here in Sayreville and before about 420 other planning and zoning boards in the state of New Jersey. I've been practicing for about 23 years as a licensed professional planner, in addition to providing affirmative testimony on behalf of applicants. I'm an adjunct land use instructor for the Rutgers Center for...
Motion to accept the qualifications. Anybody,
Thank you.
everybody okay?
So the application that you have before you this evening is a minor subdivision to subdivide what was always owned by the client's family as two individual lots. Those lots are known as Lot 4.05 and Lot 4.06 in Block 29, and the property fronts on Amboy Turnpike. There is an existing dwelling on what is shown on your plans as Lot 4.05, an existing 1.5-story masonry dwelling. There's also a masonry garage on the eastern portion of that site that sits approximately 4.4 feet off the property line. So we do need a variance for that existing nonconformity. That, whether this application is approved or denied, will not impact that existing nonconformity. So we are not proposing to make it better, we're not proposing to make it worse. An existing condition that has prevailed in the property for some number of decades. The application that's before you tonight simply seeks to have these two lots recognized as two individual separate lots. The reason we need a variance is because this property sits in the R10 zone. The R10 zone requires 100 feet of frontage. While we're conforming with respect to area, so it's not an issue as if we're shoehorning lots onto lots that are smaller than they need to be, the 10,000 square foot minimum lot requirement is actually exceeded. In fact, other than the nonconformity for the existing masonry garage, these lots will meet all other bulk criteria for the R10 zone. So we have a lot area of 28,000 square feet utilizing an interior lot area requirement of 10,000 square feet, you can see how these lots are very comfortable to fit in not only with your zoning, and I'll provide a little bit more testimony as to the character of this area, because there are about 7 residential lots on this side. If you look at the tax maps for the borough in Block 29, there are 7 residential lots on this side of Bordentown Amboy Turnpike. 4 of them are similarly situated with 75-foot frontages. 2 have 100, and then there's this peculiar little lot 4.13, that's triangular in shape, that's actually smaller, but has more frontage because it's a peculiar odd lot. So the board can certainly grant the statutory relief that's required in conjunction with this application under the C2 statutory criteria, where you find that certain purposes of the municipal land use law are advanced. I think the board can rely on criteria A, or I'm sorry, strike that, criteria C, which talks about providing adequate light, air, and open space. The dwelling that's on the property and the proposed dwelling will meet the side yard setbacks, the front yard setbacks, and the lots actually exceed the minimum requirements for the zone. So I don't think that there's going to be a problem with crowding or shoehorning lots in here. The board can also, in my opinion, rely on criteria E, which talks about establishing appropriate population densities. The existing site has a density of about 1.5 units per acre of land, and the proposed density is 3 units per acre. So still under the 4 dwelling units per acre that's permissible under the R10 zoning. So I certainly think the board can rely on criteria E and find that it's an appropriate population density. And again, just to do that math for you, it's a 28,000 square foot lot. You divide it in half, it's roughly 14,000 square foot lots, minimum lot area of 10. I think you can easily conclude that we fit in with the density. Criteria G talks about sufficient space and appropriate locations for a variety of uses. This is an appropriate lot that has been utilized residentially. We are flanked on either side by residential lots, and we're zoned for residential use. So I think criteria G is appropriate. And then also criteria M, an efficient use of the land. The unsubdivided lot, if you will, if you put these 2 lots back together, is far in excess of any of the residential lots in the character of this area. So I think it lends itself to a more efficient land layout if, in fact, the properties are subdivided and allowed to be utilized as the applicant and her family had always intended them to be. So that's the positive criteria for the grant of the C2 variant. We also have an obligation to demonstrate to you that the negative criteria are satisfied, and that really has 2 prongs to it, the impact on the zone plan and the surrounding properties. So as far as the surrounding properties, the masonry garage, which sits on our eastern property line, is immediately adjacent to some sheds on our neighboring property. So it's not, the dwelling on that property is actually situated much further up towards Bordentown Amboy Turnpike. So it's not as if that side yard is next to any residential windows or any activity on that side. There's also no man doors on the side of that garage that would impact the utilization of our property to the east. So, and it's been there. It's not as if we're introducing this into the neighborhood. It's prevailed there for decades. So I think it's a character of the lot that, whether this application is approved or not, will continue to prevail on the property. As far as the impact on the zone plan, I see no substantial detriment. The land use law does not actually hold this or any other applicant to the burden of proof that there be no detriment, just that the benefits of the grant of the variance outweigh the detriment. And here, I think, when you look at the property, this looks as if it's a vacant lot. I think the home that could be built on what would be lot 4.06 would be consistent with the character of the area. And I think the lot size at 75 feet would be consistent with the character of the area. And I think we're certainly compliant with the spirit and intensity and the density that the borough has established for the R10 zone. So taken together, I think I see a lack of detriments, and I see an application that meets its statutory burden of proof. But for the fact that these lots were merged, this lot would have existed and likely been developed at some point. So I think the application, in my opinion, can be granted under the C2 statutory criteria with no substantial detriment to the public good or the zone plan.
Any questions?
Yeah, I do. I have a question.
Go ahead.
Do you have a chart or anything that shows the existing properties within the area, what their sizes are? Because you say the majority of the properties are similar in size, or
I do, I have the tax map, so I can give you that, we can mark that into evidence. So I have a sheet of the tax map that shows the existing lots 4.05 and 4.06, and then you can see the frontages and the sizes of the area that surrounds it. And just to help you orient yourself, if you're looking at the tax, do you have the tax map? I think that's is that the survey or the
I
tax
got
map?
it, this is.
Okay, so the existing 1.5-story frame dwelling sits on what you would be looking at as lot 4.05 on the tax maps. So it's on that portion of the property. So you can see how a house on what is shown as 4.06 on the tax maps fits in with the rhythm and the spacing of these tax map lots.
On the, you're asking for a variance on the borough design standard for the curbs and sidewalks. What's the justification for that? Wouldn't, Jay, wouldn't the county require curbs on a major road?
Mr. Chairman, this is a county road. One of the conditions of the board acts favorably is they would have to go to the county and get county approval. The county may or may not require curb and sidewalk. The majority of the houses along this stretch of the roadway do not have curb and sidewalk, so there may be grounds to justify a waiver, but I think that would be up to the county to determine once they submit their application.
You're saying the majority of the properties there do not have it?
Along this stretch, where you've got these single-family houses from the landscaping business down toward the S-bend, I think you don't really get the curb until you get toward the S-bend area.
Okay, I got you. I got it. All right, thank you. That's all I have.
Certainly.
No other questions? Counselor, you have the CME report and our planners report. If you can just go through those and acknowledge the items. Well, the record. Just want to go through the items. real quick, yeah?
Can't tell from this, can't tell from this, or this.
Yeah, that one.
Okay. We usually go through them just one by one, let them say it. Just indicate the item number and you agree with it, that's all.
I have before me the CME letter dated May 8th. Is that the one you're
Yes,
speaking of?
yes.
Yeah. Number one, we're okay with regard to the completion of the application. Number two, we are proposing what's in accordance with number two, the 275 lot frontage variances on both properties. With regard to what was mentioned also earlier about the other, we'll agree to that also. Number three, we've agreed with what's required and what's provided based upon testimony of our expert. And with regard to number four, we're okay with that also. I have the technical engineering review behind that. You want me to go through that also?
No, yeah, you're okay with that, Jay? The technical engineering?
Mr. Chairman, I believe that the applicant's attorney has indicated he would comply. Just to point out the curb and sidewalk, I think the board would agree to grant a waiver unless it's required by the county. And the next item on a waiver, the existing driveway is not 5 foot from the property line, which is a design standard requirement. That's an existing condition, not proposed to be changed at all, so that would be another waiver that's required. And the other item is, any future development, they would have to comply with the borough requirements. So they'll have to submit a grading plan, they'll have to submit a tree preservation plan, a soil erosion plan, all those requirements, but that wouldn't be required until they actually make an application for a building permit.
Gotcha.
And we're okay with that also.
Thank you.
I also have what was presented to me today, dated May 6th, with regard to the planner's letter, and we're okay with that also with regard to the project description, the variances, and the planning considerations.
Thank you. Any comments from the board for open up for the public? This time, open up for the public for any comments on this application only. Anybody from the public like to speak? Seeing none, I'll close the public portion. Gentlemen, ladies?
I think that the properties, like the lady said, are pretty much the same as the majority of the properties there. I really don't see any issue. Like she was saying, the lot area more than complies with the size of the property, and it's not out of character, I think, for the...
Okay, you want to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll make the motion to approve this.
Second.
We're going to make the motion to approve and accept with the variances and waivers as identified. I got a motion, a second, roll call, please.
Yes.
Councilman Delana?
Yes.
Mr. Davis? Mr. Kelly? Mr. McEnone?
Yes.
Ms. O'Leary? Mr. Volusin? Ms. Matilla? Application granted.
Application's approved. Excellent presentation, thank you. Okay, next on the agenda, we're going to get a presentation on the North American Properties, Fulton Landing redevelopment plan report dated April 11th. There are copies of them up here on the table from anybody from the public who wants to see the document that will be presented tonight. Where did he go? Oh, there it is.
Just for the record, there's actually two issues. One is the redevelopment plan and the alterations and modifications to the master plan.
Right, well, let's do the development plan first.
So we're gonna start with the redevelopment plan.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm gonna swear in.
Yeah.
The other one?
It's going to swear you in first, please.
Yes,
Swear testimony you're about to give the board in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Just one second. Are there any attorneys in the audience that are here in connection with representing people in the community? I just want to know who hired the court reporter. Oh, you did? Okay. All right, do you want to be acknowledged, sir?
There are counsel for the property owner.
Okay, thank you. You're an observer, right? Mr. Lair? Okay.
Depends on what I say, Mark.
I thought I was the only one that said maybe. Now I have another guy. All right, go ahead,
You
sir.
good.
I don't think we finished swearing me in. We didn't get my name and stuff.
Didn't I swear you in?
We swore me in, but we got a
Let's have your name and address for the record.
John Barry, B-A-R-R-E-E, with Higher Grohl and Associates. Address is 236 Broad Street, Red Bank, New Jersey. Licensed professional planner.
You've presented
spoke
before us
about you
before,
before.
so we're okay.
Yes, I presented before this board, and I represent the zoning board in the borough.
Proceed.
Okay. So, this evening, we are here to discuss the Fulton's Landing redevelopment plan that was forwarded to the board. It was introduced by the Borough Council on April 23rd and forwarded to the board for its review and recommendation under the local redevelopment and housing law statute. So, start with some procedural kind of overview. The board's role under the local redevelopment and housing law is to hear a presentation and then make a recommendation to the council as to the plan's consistency with the borough's master plan, and then any other recommendations that the board finds are appropriate to make back to the council. So the board is in an advisory role, is in a referral capacity. The board doesn't approve or deny the plan. The board can make recommendations to the council, but ultimately the council is the body that acts to either approve this plan, deny this plan, modify it in some way.
We understand that
Go
role.
from there. Okay. For the members of the public as well. And then also for members of the public, just so it's clear, I'm not here representing a developer, I'm here on behalf of the borough.
Are you,
So-
you're going to refer to the Fulton Landing redevelopment plan, correct?
Yes.
Well, let's mark that as A1.
Okay.
Is there anything else that we need to pre-mark now?
I have two boards. Do you want to mark those as for the record?
Might as well mark them, A2 and A3, they can be part of the record.
Can you push it back so we all can see?
Sure.
If no one,
Yeah, I don't-
if the public can't see that, you could just slide over or something.
Let's see. Does that get most people? So A2 is an aerial map of the subject property and its surroundings. And then A3 is a zoomed-in aerial map with some buffer lines and setback lines drawn on it. Okay. So by way of background, we have the subject property here in question. It was designated as an area in need of redevelopment in 2018. It consists of 3 tax lots. It's Block 249, Lot 1, Block 250, Lot 1, and Block 251, Lot 1. Collectively, they're referred to as the Mako property in a variety of places. The total area of the lots is about 158 acres. It's a very sizable tract of land located on the south side of Main Street between White Oaks Drive and Crossman Road, north of Kennedy Park and the Lakeview Drive. So the background of how we got here, which I'll run through briefly because I think it's relevant to our review as far as the master plan consistency, is that there was a master plan reexamination report done in 2011 that recommended the rezoning of the western portion of this property from the PD7 zone, which remains the zoning today, to a special economic development 2 district.
What's PD7?
PD7 is a Plan Development 7. It's a residential zone, and there is also an option for senior citizen and office overlay. Subsequent to that, the borough went through the process of rezoning that in accordance with the recommendation that was made by this board in its reexamination report, and that led to what has now been a lengthy court battle with the property owner. Without going into any real detail on it, that ordinance was thrown out. There was another ordinance that was adopted to rezone the property, which was again thrown out. And then in 2013, the borough's current master plan followed through with the recommendation from the reexamination report of recommending the rezoning of that property again to the SED2, Special Economic Development 2 district, which up to this point, that rezoning has not happened. So today, the western portion of the property is in the PD7 zone. The eastern portion of the property is in the SED, Special Economic Development District. There was a site plan approval granted for the eastern portion of the property, a development known as Crossman. It was a warehouse development consisting of approximately 610,000 square feet of mixed warehouse space with some accessory office space. And that was a site plan was granted, approval was granted in 2013. There was also an application filed for the western portion of the property for a proposed construction of 207 single-family homes under the PD7 zoning that hasn't moved forward at this time. So that sets the stage for where we are now. The most recent development in the borough's ongoing review and court with the property owner is the potential adoption of this redevelopment plan, which in effect puts the recommendations from the 2013 master plan into place by proposing a warehouse distribution district for the entirety of the property, which is consistent in many ways with the Special Economic Development and Special Economic Development 2 land use categories that are proposed under the borough's master plan. So we've gone a long way to end up close to where we started. But tonight we're talking about the specifics of this redevelopment plan. The plan, as I said, proposes a single zone district for the entirety of the 158 acre property. The purpose of the plan is to develop a warehousing and distribution style of complex to promote economic development and to address some of the borough's long-term goals regarding stabilization of the job and tax base, and to promote a balance of land uses within the borough, promote new non-residential ratables. The landscape of non-residential and industrial style warehousing development throughout the state it's a very hot market. It's anywhere that has good highway access that's relatively close to the ports and airport are right now hotbeds for this type of development, and there is great demand. The movement of goods throughout the state, up and down the turnpike, Route 18, Route 9, is ever growing. This location is generally well suited to be part of that transportation network and from a statewide perspective. So the goal and objective is to capitalize on the borough's geographic location in relation to these major transportation arteries, and to balance the improvements in the area with protecting existing residential developments. We'll get into some of the design requirements and standards in this plan and how that balance is hoped to achieve. We'll look at making sure that development of this type, with the increased truck traffic that comes along with it, that there are provisions made for modifications to traffic patterns along Main Street to ensure that the site is able to fit in and that the increase in truck traffic is accommodated. Most importantly, we're talking about promoting economic development and job creation and stimulating outside investment in the borough, improving the utilization of a piece of land that's been vacant it has a history of mining, but has been vacant for many years. Along with that, bolstering the municipal non-residential tax base, as I said, with commercial and industrial uses. We're also including within the plan some provisions to promote the modern, energy efficient, environmentally sustainable building and site operation practices. As part of the development of this plan, there was some consideration, as I said, of traffic and circulation issues, and the borough's engineer had an opportunity, CME Associates had an opportunity to review the general concept that was the basis for coming up with this plan, to render an opinion about the types of improvements that might be needed and the types of traffic volumes that are to be expected. That report made several recommendations about potential widening of Main Street, signalization at various site driveways, the restriction on truck traffic to the west on Main Street, which is an important point. The major highway networks are to the east for the most part, and sending trucks west along Main Street into the downtown part of the borough is really not an appropriate outcome, and it's much easier to get out of town to the east than it is to the west. So those suggestions from the CME review were incorporated as part of the design requirements in the plan. So I'll get into the land use plan itself, which is the regulatory backbone of the plan. So the land use plan calls for a warehousing and distribution district. The purpose is to attract those types of businesses to the area, spur the redevelopment of the area in a manner that promotes economic development in a balance with the residential properties surrounding and with the traffic concerns along Main Street and throughout the borough. The list of permitted principal uses, some specific different types of warehousing and distribution businesses. Warehousing and storage facilities are permitted. Distribution centers and fulfillment centers, which are facilities that package, fulfill orders, and directly distribute e-commerce shipments and similar products to external customers. The transload facility, which is more of a facility that deals with larger pallet-sized loads where you have trucks unloading, being broken down, and then generally larger lots of things going out to wholesalers, retailers. Cold storage warehouses, which are refrigerated facilities. Light manufacturing uses, which deal with the transformation of products or parts into new products, assembling, converting, altering, and finishing components, manufacturing of products of a light nature, including paper, wood, or food products, and light manufacture and light machinery. So these are generally non-nuisance producing kinds of things. And then office uses, The permitted accessory uses are generally typical things that would be accessory to those principal uses: offices, passenger vehicle, truck parking, solar panels, and building-mounted telecommunication facilities. And then we specifically prohibit the storage or stacking of shipping containers. The accumulation of shipping containers can be a challenge for certain types of warehousing distribution operations. This plan does not want to see any storage of shipping containers out of doors, any stacking of those containers, so that's specifically prohibited in the land use plan. I'm going to shift the board here to A3 to talk about the bulk standards. The plan has a requirement for a minimum lot area of 40 acres. So there could potentially down the line be a subdivision of the property if it were deemed appropriate or necessary by a future developer. The minimum required front yard and rear yard setbacks are 200 feet. And I apologize, there's a red dashed line within that plan that may be hard to see for some folks in the audience. There's a 200-foot front and rear yard setback and a 300-foot side-to-side setback. So I'm going to trace that area here. So within these areas outside the dotted line, buildings are not permitted to be constructed. So building setbacks have to be inside of that dotted line. Then there's a requirement to maintain a 100-foot landscape buffer along Main Street. The Main Street corridor right now is fairly heavily vegetated. There's also some pretty steep slope differentials along there at different parts. The plan allows for that to be disrupted at different places to permit the construction of driveways and other site access points, but requires that a minimum of 100-foot landscape buffer be maintained along that corridor to reduce any kind of visual impact from the development taking place further in the site. The left side, the west side of the property, has the requirement to maintain a 150-foot wide landscape buffer. And the plan requires that that be a buffer of 3 staggered rows of evergreens on an elevated berm. So not only do we have a good bit of width there, but also some elevation in terms of the height of the berm, along with the staggering of the evergreens, provides a year-round buffer. The maximum building coverage for the lot is 30% of the lot area. Maximum lot coverage, impervious coverage, is 80%, and maximum height of any building is 50 feet. We have parking requirements of 1 parking space per 5,000 square feet of the warehousing, distribution, light manufacturing types of uses, and 1 space per 500 square feet of office space. We have loading standards, minimum space requirements for loading spaces of a 14-foot width, 55 feet in length, and a vertical clearance of 15 feet. And then a requirement of 1.5 truck parking spaces per loading dock. So the space, essentially the space at the loading dock itself plus a half space, so that there isn't an issue of trucks stacking up waiting to get access to loading docks. There's room to have them accommodated on site. I think one of the more important pieces of the land use plan is the discussion of circulation improvements. The plan calls for widening of Main Street along the property frontage to provide dedicated turning lanes. Ultimately, that's a design that'll have to be worked through by borough engineer, and certainly there's going to be many levels of review at that point, but the applicant will be responsible down the line, assuming the plan is adopted, for making sure that the access to the site from Main Street is able to be accommodated without completely backing up traffic. Signalized intersections will be provided to create full movement intersections at driveways opposite Kimball Drive West and Kimball Drive East. Those would be the 2 major points of access to the site. And then truck traffic should not be permitted to exit the site to the west, as I was discussing before, so that trucks leave the site to the east And similarly, truck traffic should not be permitted to arrive from the west. All truck traffic in and out will be from the east on Main Street. The master plan recommends, and this goes back to 1998 and even earlier with some previously approved land use applications that date back to the 80s. There's an idea of a connector road that would extend from Lakeview Drive up to Main Street to provide another link between Main Street and Washington Road. The master plan in 1998, at that time, envisioned that the western part of the property would be developed with residential properties as the PD7 zone that we were discussing before. So it made a lot of sense from a planning and design perspective to have multiple outlets for passenger vehicles, and sending traffic to both Main Street and Washington Road was a sensible outcome. In 2013, the master plan touched on the connector road and said that essentially because of the pending litigation involving this property that we're still here talking about today, it sort of put a hold on the idea of that connector. It didn't say it should be, it didn't say it shouldn't be, it just said pending the outcome of the litigation, we need to see whether or not it's still a good idea. And what the plan supposes at this point, the idea that we're talking about a more industrial style warehousing use where you have some passenger vehicle traffic and you have a lot of truck traffic, that it doesn't make sense to direct any of that truck traffic down to Lakeview Drive. And because of the challenges associated with the railroad crossing there, that the connector road is no longer something that's appropriate under this proposed plan. So the plan prohibits the extension of Lakeview Drive through this property, through the redevelopment area. The circulation portion of the plan also talks about having a redeveloper provide shuttle service to employees from park and ride lots, nearby train stations, other transit sites as deemed appropriate during the course of review to try and limit the amount of passenger vehicle traffic depending on the number of employees, where they're coming from. That's something that should be considered down the line. And the plan requires a traffic impact analysis, as is typical for large-scale developments when they come before boards for review. The next section of the plan is the design standards. I touched on the buffering issue, the 150-foot buffer to the west and the 100-foot buffer to the north along Main Street. The only other landscaping requirement is that landscaping be provided around the perimeter of parking areas and a combination of trees and shrubs, and that there be shade trees planted every 50 feet to break up the site, soften the site in general. Next section is a lighting requirement. Requires that the lighting intensity not exceed 0.1 foot candles at any property line, lighting fixtures not exceed 30 feet in height, that they utilize LED fixtures, and that site lighting include either a dimming function or motion sensors to reduce illumination during evening hours. Parking and circulation section is fairly standard, requires that there be safe operation on site, that trucks be able to maneuver without interfering with each other or the maneuvering patterns of passenger vehicles on site. Require that sidewalks be provided along Main Street and that there be a connection between the bus stop along Main Street into the property so that there's a safe and convenient access for people who take the bus to the site. Recycling and refuse collection require that there be appropriate space for collection of all recyclables and refuse, and that those facilities be adequately screened, landscaping and solid screens. Next section is signage. There's permits of one freestanding sign, monument sign per driveway, no taller than 10 feet, so low monument signs would be permitted, set back at least 15 feet from the Main Street property line, and then wall signs permitted a maximum of 50 square feet per tenant per surface area, 50 square feet per surface area. The storage requirement, there's no permitted storage of materials or equipment outside. All storage must be done interior to a building, so there's no stacking of, as I said before, the shipping containers, but also no storage of any other kinds of materials that may be used on site. So the warehousing and distribution takes place within buildings, not outside. There's a stormwater management section that refers to the borough's standard ordinance. We have some green building standards in the plan to promote energy efficiency, encourage solar energy facilities as a rooftop. Because, warehouse facilities, often large flat buildings that lend themselves nicely to a roof-mounted solar array. And then, depending on the type of use inside the building, there are a variety of efficiency measures that can be undertaken to improve the comfort of occupants and also reduce energy consumption. So that's the meat of the plan. That's the land use plan within the redevelopment plan, along with the design standards. I'll wrap up with a brief review of its relationship to the borough's other planning documents, and then we can go from there as the chairman decides. As I said before, the 2013 Borough Master Plan refers to these properties under the future land use element, the eastern portion as the SED, Special Economic Development District, the western portion as the SED2. The SED classification promotes a variety, allows a variety of commercial and industrial uses that promote economic development. Doesn't get into any particular specificity in the master plan, but the zoning ordinance does permit this kind of facility on the SED portion of the site, as evidenced by the site plan that was approved for a very similar type of facility back in 2013. The SED2 classification permits wholesale and distribution facilities, which again is consistent with what's proposed here in the master plan. The only issue that's really left unresolved in the master plan is the question of a connector road from Lakeview Drive. As I said, the 2013 master plan does refer to the fact that it was recommended in 1998, but leaves it as an open question pending the resolution of the litigation on the property. And I think in light of the fact that the proposed land use shifts from what was a partially residential to now entirely warehousing, distribution, light industrial type of land use, that the circumstances that underwrote that proposal have changed. So in the discussion that I'll have in the next part of this presentation, the idea is that the clarification pending the resolution of the litigation is essentially that it's no longer appropriate to extend Lakeview Drive because of the changed nature of the future land use of the property. So that I would, in my opinion as a professional planner, I certainly defer to Mr. Leoncavallo and the board's opinion. I believe that the proposed land uses within this plan are consistent with the 2013 Borough Master Plan, and that the board can make that recommendation if it so desires, along with any other recommendations it may have.
Go ahead, Mr. Vos.
A couple questions on your road widening.
Sure.
On the top of your plan there, the light green where you show the road widening in front of your site, that's relatively simple. However, from the upper right-hand corner from your site all the way down to the Main Street extension, are you planning on widening Main Street to a 4-lane highway?
Well, at this point, the consideration is for the property frontage and to look at left turn movements in and out of the site. And that's where we are with this plan. I don't know if the borough has considered taking that further down the line. It's not part of this redevelopment plan. I don't know if Mr. Cornell has any input he can offer, but not to put him on the spot.
It just seems to me that you're widening it in front of your property, but what happens after you hit the traffic light? I mean, from the traffic light at the industrial section there, all the way down, that's 2 lanes.
No, understood, and I think that the design is going to have to look at all of that as it happens. There's going to be new signals, most likely, as part of this redevelopment, along with that widening to add an additional left turn lane. It's not quite as simple as just saying we're going to widen it from here to here and then leave it
Yeah,
alone.
exactly.
So,
I mean, that road, from the hours of 7 o'clock to 8:30 in the morning is packed.
no, I've been on it and I understand the concern.
Now, I've been backed up to Pulaski Avenue.
No.
All right, so you're creating a bottleneck right there at that upper right-hand corner.
As I said, the challenge will be to meter that appropriately with new traffic signals.
It's going to take more than a traffic signal.
Ladies and gentlemen, please. Ladies and gentlemen, everybody that wants to speak will have an opportunity to speak. Just let us get through the board questioning. Appreciate it. I respectfully ask that you just comply with that. Thank you.
Chairman, I have just a quick
Yes.
follow-up.
I would head to, but go ahead.
Mr. Velosin, on the 100 feet buffer,
Yes.
what we just talked about, if there's a need for another lane, is that going to come out of, that's going to come out of the buffer? It's not going to come out of the other side of Main Street?
Well, it would
there's
come out of
development
it would come out of the property frontage, but then the buffer would shift
slip
with it.
back.
So if we were to widen the right-of-way, the buffer would be measured from the new
that-
right-of-way line.
Is that stated anywhere in your, I didn't see it
Well,
in here.
It's not explicitly stated. We could,
I
I
think
mean,
it
it's
should
from
be-
the property line, so if the property line
Should be
shifts-
detailed that there's going to be some flexibility, and that 100-foot buffer will remain 100 feet.
That's a good recommendation.
I know you do have.
Yeah.
I think that should be. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
So
Talk into the microphone so we can.
So there's only one in and out, because obviously on the other side of the development, that was taken off the table coming in from Washington Road. So it's just the one light and one in and out? There's not several entrances or exits?
It's anticipated that there would be, at minimum, signals at Kimball Drive West and Kimball Drive East, along with possibly another right turn only type of exit out onto Main Street. So for a property this size, it would be tough to have just a single point of entrance and exit. This is something.
No, that's what I want, more entrances or
Right,
exits.
yeah.
So it's
I'm
not
saying
all
that
funneled
the
into
plan
one.
calls for 2 signals plus the possibility of additional entrances and exits as it gets engineered and a final design comes back before the board down the line. Yeah.
Hey, John, several times in your report, it mentions 1.8 million square feet.
Yes.
And that's what you envision.
That's what this plan was based on. There was back and forth as part of the mediation with the courts, and a rough concept was prepared illustrating approximately 1.8 million square feet. That was used as the basis for the traffic analysis that was done and used to underlie the assumptions for this report. It wasn't a number that I made up. It was something that's been talked about in the context of mediation and settlement.
But to put that in perspective, your average Home Depot store is about 105,000 square feet. We're talking about something 18 times that size. In your goals and objectives, it says to ensure that traffic patterns along Main Street are not adversely impacted by new development in the area. How are we putting trucks into that and to not affect the traffic patterns? I think traffic lights impede traffic more than they keep the flow going.
Well, it depends on if traffic's backing up because of turning motions, so depending on the.
Well, it backs up
scenario.
now, and nobody's turning
Right,
into nothing.
No, but I'm saying at different points, I was driving here today, we were backed up because somebody was making a left turn. But I'm not a traffic engineer, and that's not, the end design of this is not really my purview.
I understand.
But I was relying on the recommendations made in the CME analysis of the proposed development, and then down the line, there'll be a whole host of opportunities to vet whatever ends up happening.
One thing you mentioned that's an obstacle, and you said that it's no longer appropriate, is that north-south connector from Lakeview Drive to Main Street.
Yeah.
Why do you say that's not appropriate? Is that an opinion?
Well, I think that for a couple of reasons, sending truck traffic out through Lakeview Drive.
Well, we wouldn't do that.
What's that?
We wouldn't do that. What
Well-
about how many people you envision would work in 1.8 million square feet of warehouse? A couple of hundred?
Probably more than that. It depends on shift work and
How are
full-time
they going to
versus
get into the
part-time.
site?
As I said, they're going to come in passenger vehicles, and they're going to take the bus, and they're going to get there in different ways.
Right, they would come in through a Lakeview extension. You give that opportunity to decrease the flow of traffic on the other end. I don't think if I worked in a location like that, that I would park my car, get on a shuttle bus, and then have that take me to my work site. I would just drive my car to Main Street and go in that way. But if the connector is there, and I think, you know, the master plan is very specific. I had the verbiage here of 1998. It said that any development of this property would be a requirement for the future development for that extension to occur.
Yeah, and then the more recent master plan hedges back on that. So that's the
Right.
The proposed land use shifted from 1998 to 2013.
And
and that's
I
what I
wasn't
based
on the
my
planning
analysis on.
board back then, but I'm thinking, the thinking is, when you look at a circulation plan for the borough, you can't just look at just one piece of property, it's how that piece of the puzzle fits into the overall town. And I think we found, when roads are closed, that north-south connectors are very important. And, you know, the master plan of that time, too, was to extend North Ernston Road, which we have done. But also included in that is to extend that Lakeview Drive to Main Street to have another north-south connector. The other thing, from a public safety perspective issue I have, if you have 1.8 million square feet of warehouse on fire, you don't have an opportunity to get in there when you have a first aid squad right at that intersection of Lakeview and Main, and you have firehouses on Washington Road. I mean, I think that's an obstacle as well. And that's why I think when you look at extensions in north-south flow and circulation in the borough, you take those kinds of things into consideration. So I don't think to say it's no longer appropriate, I think it's an opinion, because I think what you're telling me, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't want to put words in your mouth, that traffic numbers would be reduced by having the warehouses there versus a combination of residents and warehouses. Is that the
Well,
thesis?
yeah, and that's not my conclusion, but I can relay that from traffic study that was done by Langen Engineering and then reviewed by CME Associates, that was the conclusion, that the combination of a residential development plus smaller warehousing development would generate more traffic than this proposed just warehousing distribution
Does the
development.
report delineate between a movement of a car and a movement of an 18-wheeler?
It does, but it doesn't talk about, it has some issues with the distribution. So it's something that needs to be studied some more as far as the traffic impact goes.
I think when you look at the overall flow of traffic, you know, we're also building a Riverton development, the old National Lead site, and this Main Street is going to be a corridor to that development as well.
Right.
I think when you look at this as a whole, I think that north-south connector becomes even more pertinent.
Well, to that end, the master plan and the borough's plans envision the Main Street bypass further north that would hopefully address some of those issues with the Riverton property. But I understand your point, and I think that the idea of a north-south connector is a good one. I think this particular location with the train tracks being where they are make a challenge to that connection, and I think the potential of truck traffic going out through Lakeview Drive is inappropriate.
There's many places in town where we go over under railroad tracks.
No.
Any other questions from the board? Yes.
Yes. Well, I didn't measure them, but I would estimate that the trees that are out there along Main Street now are taller, some of them, many of them are taller than 50 feet. And there's a berm and a slope down from Main Street, so. Correct. The intent would be to preserve as much of that existing buffer as possible along Main Street, both the vegetation and the berming effect, so that what's going on deeper in the site doesn't stick out as much when you're passing by. As I talked about on the western buffer, we're talking about not only planting trees, but planting them on an elevated berm, so that there's a nice existing row of evergreens behind a good portion of the development there that's on the opposite side of where the power lines go through. But supplement that on the property with elevated berm, triple row of trees planted at the time of planting 8 to 10 feet tall, but depending on the species, they grow pretty quickly, and eventually we'll get up to, depending on the species, but they could be 50-foot tall trees. And then even more of a building setback into the site from the edge of that buffer. So we're talking about a lot of distance and a lot of things in between to soften all of that visual aspect.
Any other questions from the board? Professionals? Yes. You're talking to the microphone?
Yes. The 150-foot buffer, years ago, before we got into the litigation, we were talking with Mr. Mako about having that buffer along there and being able to take a pedestrian walkway through that buffer area, whatever it was. Now it's going to be, let's say, 150 feet. Is that something you could incorporate into your plan, having an actual, besides serving as a buffer, also, being a pedestrian trailway between the townhouses at the top of your exhibit down to the open space in Kennedy Park?
I think that's a fine idea, and I consider that myself. I didn't know if it was something that the borough was interested in, or if it would be deemed as I don't know if a security issue is the right word for it, but if that's something that the borough wants to pursue, I think it's a fine idea.
Again, it may be an option that you want to at least explore a little bit in the document. Thank you.
Any other questions? Alan?
You said that based on the litigation, when it's resolved, that you would then look at the Main Street bypass. Is that right? Because here in the report, Middlesex County is saying that they've identified this as an important part of this project for the truck traffic.
Could you point me to the page you're looking at?
24 and 25.
Sure. You're talking about the discussion of the Middlesex County
You
Transportation?
had said that the bypass wouldn't be discussed or wouldn't come up until after the litigation was resolved.
You're talking about the north-south connector. The bypass is
Yeah,
the other road.
I was referencing how the
Lakeview.
2013 master plan leaves the question of the north-south connector open pending the litigation. Regarding the bypass, I point out in here, because part of preparing these plans is to look at other relevant planning documents. And I point out that the Main Street bypass is something that's been identified in the county's transportation plan. Obviously, the borough's working on it. Its effect on this particular property is more, it's probably more as a relieves traffic in general on Main Street rather than any specific opportunities for this site, because similarly to how I don't think it's appropriate to send truck traffic south through Lakeview Drive, I don't think it's appropriate to send any truck traffic north through Kimball Drive.
I don't think we're looking at putting truck traffic through Lakeview Drive. We're discussing it for passenger vehicles only.
Okay.
And it probably could be restricted to only passenger vehicles,
And-
no trucks.
And that's why we're here, so that kind of recommendation is something that,
I think that the point that Mike makes with the fire department and the first aid
Sure.
being north of it, they'd have to come all the way around town for any emergency.
I'm with you.
How does the bypass, or how does this development affect the bypass north of, like, once the litigation is resolved?
No. I don't know that it has any impact on the bypass.
Are you talking
at
about
all.
Lakeview Drive?
No, I'm talking about the bypass, getting out of, from here out to the bridge.
Like South River Bridge.
No,
Along
the
American.
bypass road, only one portion of it has been approved so far, right? I'm talking about the second portion.
Well, that's
It's north of here, quite good ways. I don't have the distance specifically. I don't know that this property will have any direct impact on it. I think the bypass
Think it
road as
will.
part of the bigger picture network is important.
Exactly.
Whatever happens on this
I mean,
site,
how do you allow this here to be built and put into place without having relief for that truck traffic with having a bypass road?
well, as I said, I don't think the bypass road would help the truck traffic to and from this site necessarily, because getting up to the bypass road would be the issue.
That would help the cars
We're
though, to
just-
go around that.
You wouldn't want to go.
It would be the more global transportation network impact. the trucks from this site,
You're
east off Main
recommending
Street.
having the truck traffic exit from to the north and east of this property,
To the east, yeah.
which would go into that upper right-hand corner of your diagram.
Right.
Right? I think that's where the bypass road was supposed to go, up through Crossman and then out the back to the bridge.
Right, a later.
And that's
fa-
gonna
yeah.
take care of the truck traffic.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry, I was talking about the piece behind.
What I'm
the
saying
Kimball Drive,
is,
yeah.
how do you develop this property for this type of truck traffic without having that bypass road?
Well, I don't know, I believe there was,
Is it allowed to be one contingent upon the other?
at this point, I don't know that that's an option. Something that the borough can look
I don't
into.
think it is an option, right?
The,
Right, but I
um,
mean, it's-
I don't know what the status of I know there was the look needed for some property acquisition to finish up the bypass, that section of it. I don't know whether that's been explored or not, where we are with that process. Unfortunately, I don't have that level of detail.
Any other questions? If not, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up for the public. I'd like you to come up, please state your name and address for the record. This gentleman had his hand up first. No, I'm talking about this side.
Thank you very
That's
much.
gonna be-
It's not. Can I use? Yeah. My name's Ed Little. I live at 12 Piero Court, Sayreville, in the Main Street townhouses.
Sir, I have to swear you in. You want to raise your right hand?
Sorry about that.
Swear the testimony you're about to give the board in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. As I said, my name's Ed Little. I'm actually a native of New Jersey, and my family goes back to the colonies here, so deep roots. My wife bought in the townhouse about 30 years ago. She always knew about the bypass. She bought anyway because you need the bypass. We really don't have any deep objections to the new development across the street, if it's done properly and taking into consideration of the people around them. I know you guys have a very tough job balancing things out, but I've always viewed, and correct me if I'm wrong, that your main focus is the safety of the community and for the betterment of lifestyle in the community. What obviously I'm concerned with is, right now it sounds a little bit better, but not much. The bypass is supposed to go all the way to Crossman, which is ideal. But as far as the last information I got, they're going to be stopping at Kimball, both Kimballs, and all the traffic that's going down the bypass is going down and splitting our community into 3 separate areas. I'm concerned for the children in the area. I'm concerned about my family coming visiting me, including my great-granddaughter. I'm concerned about me getting out of Piero Court. I'm glad to hear that absolutely no trucks will be going up those roads, but if you build it and end it at Kimball, trucks are going to go up that road. There's no way you're going to stop that. So we're concerned with that. My recommendation, you know, for what it's worth, one of my many careers was process engineering. You know, when this is built, don't build it in piecemeal. Wait until the second part is ready. Go to Cosman, come straight up, and you'll have the entrance into the back of the warehouse the way it's supposed to. That section of road down there is already 4 lanes. It's wide enough to handle the traffic. If you do it up here in front of the Main Street townhouses, you'll take away that entire brim when you make the road, and you'll have to replant all those trees. So all those trees will disappear. The other thing that is currently affecting me right now, and most of the people in Piero Court, my wife, as I said, lived there for 30 years. Never had any water in the sump pump. Over the last year or so, we've been getting continuous water, and everybody in the neighborhood has been getting continuous water, and it correlates to the work that they've been doing across the way. So it doesn't take a genius to know that the water flow has changed somehow. I don't think it's the runoff from the top. I think it's the water table. As you know, there's a lot of streams underneath our town. Right now, one of those streams is going into my basement. So, you know, the safety is critical. The other aspect is if traffic has gone up the Kimball Drives, more and more people that don't live in the community will be parking there, and we have no parking at all there. If two families have a party on the same day, no parking whatsoever is on any of the Kimbells. So that's going to make it even more difficult for people in the community. The other aspect, as you know, snow removal. Kimball Piero Court has no visitors parking spot, and we have no place to put the snow as it is. Our contractors do a fantastic job getting rid of it. Well, a lot of times they accidentally put it on city properties and they get fined. So we're concerned about what's going to happen. The parking is critical. I can see if that makes a through street from the bypass to Main Street, you'll probably say, oh, we'll make that a non-parking street. That would destroy us because we don't have parking as it is. And you know people, they'll speed up that way. They'll cut through the developments into the other areas just to get rid of, bypass the lights. Oh, by the way, 2 lights. If every truck's coming from the east, 2 lights is useless because they both have to go stop through the first light. So I don't think the truck is going to stop at the first light, then stop at the second light. Just an opinion. We're concerned about the noise pollution that the trucks and the development will have in the warehouse. Will there be a sufficient buffer to get rid of all the noise, especially at night? Because I'm assuming trucks will be coming in at night, work will be done at night. So we're concerned about the noise pollution. Oh, and a side question about the bypass and the additional construction. Has a police study on increased crime in the area been done yet to know the effect of crime because of the increased volume and traffic and people coming through basically a dead-end community? As I said, I recommend Cossman Road as the entrance to that large outlet. I think that's what Cossman was put there to begin with. Oh, and if we do have to have a lot of traffic going up the Kimbells, if we can get safety strips to reduce the speed possibilities. If at the all the intersections of the development going into Kimbells, we have always stops to help people get out of the development areas. Because when that bypass comes in, that's going to be a lot of traffic coming into just the Kimball roads. And I'm glad to hear that no commercial vehicles will go up those roads. That's a lifesaver, especially for the kids. So what my personal fear is, and my wife's fear is my basement will get flooded out when my sump pump burns out. Increased fear of crime is a possibility, and I think it's fair to say it's a possibility that could become fact. We are also thinking that if it becomes noisy, too crowded with traffic in our development, we'll be forced to move from where we live. You know, increased stress on us because of the traffic and the noise. And the other question is, since the original bypass was made, the floodplain in that area has increased, so most of that road's going to be in a floodplain now. So that's another thing you'll have to consider about the bypass. So I'd like to thank you for your time, and thank you for putting up with me.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Mr. Rittenhouse.
Good evening, Arthur Rittenhouse, 33 Delacat Lane, Saraville, New Jersey.
You're fine.
Arthur Rittenhouse, Rittenhouse. Also Vice Chairman of the Saraville Shade Tree Commission, and I'll explain how that is going to play in this.
Sir, can you raise your right hand so I can swear you in?
Yes.
Swear testimony about the Board in this matter, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do. I don't really know where to start. There's so many things to go through. The gentleman before me is right about the possible traffic. There was a question, the county is recommending the bypass, and it's in this report on page, I believe, 22, that it is for commercial freight. They're also recommending Washington Road. Therefore, Lakeview Drive would be the logical place to go north and south. If you're saying that you don't want the trucks on Main Street going west, then the logical thing is you put that through so that the trucks go to Washington Road. And also on the bypass, if you're going to limit the trucks going on Main Street, then I guess they're going to have to go through Town Lake on Saraville Boulevard, because that is the bypass to get out to Washington Road, which is what's recommended. But neither here nor there on that. I have a main concern that no one knows what's happening on that site. And I'm going to recommend that the planning board either withhold a recommendation or recommend no. For the last 5 years, there have been trucks coming in and out of that site from morning till night, 6 days a week. I asked Mr. Cornell 2 years ago, who checks that soil? Who is checking it? The Freehold Soil Conservation in Freehold is supposed to. No, they don't. All they did was give a permit to dump dirt there in certain areas that are on there. Do they check it? Absolutely not. They give them a list of companies that might check it for them if they'd like. So we don't know what's contained in that soil. Gentleman just mentioned the sump pumps are going more and more. What's to say there's not pollution coming in from that soil and going in and coming into our basements and the sump pumps? Something else I just found out, in the borough, the DEP permits to work on that site expired March 1st of 2018. We're now in May of 2019. I also, when Freehold came out last week to look at it, I asked them, and as a commissioner on the Shade Tree Commission, they took down some trees to open a widening part, and I'll point it out down here, which is on the Mako property, but it's coming from the next lot over where there was a chemical company, and the chemicals are leaking into Burt's Creek. Burt's Creek, for anybody who doesn't know, is the stream that runs behind Kimball Drive East. So the people on Telegraph and Burns Lane East and Faith Drive East, that overflows in heavy rains. Therefore, the chemicals that are running down Burt's Creek that DEP is now looking into, have a possible potential. So before anything is done, I think we need to look at the environmental part of this project. That's just one thing. It's basically a residential area. And the bypass. Jay has been involved in the bypass. The council, the Borough Council of Saraville, agreed that once Phase 1 is approved, they would then apply for Phase 2. Phase 3 is already on the Riverton maps. I don't think that's going to be too much of a problem. But now with Burt's Creek having environmental issues, plus a bridge has to be made to go over Burt's Creek, that could hold up approval of Phase 2. And if the borough decides to go ahead with Phase 1, then it ends at Kimball Drive East and West. And with the county saying that they're going to allow trucks on the bypass in Washington Road. And my other question is, are you going to change the master plan and not allow any trucks on Main Street? Because if you do, you now stop the steel company from using their trucks on Main Street. You stop the township of Woodbridge, whose garbage trucks all come down Main Street. the township of Old Bridge, whose garbage trucks are now coming down Main Street, all of the industry that's down at Kennedy Boulevard and Main Street Extension, the tractor trailers heading west come down Main Street. So now if you're a trucker and you're coming out of this new development, you're not allowed to turn left as you're sitting there at the traffic light watching all these other trucks go down Main Street. I think there's a lot of inconsistencies. Also, there are no permits filed with the borough for any of the work that's been done on this project. And we have an ordinance that is a fill-in ordinance, and nobody has filed it. DEP says the borough's responsible. The borough says that DEP is responsible. Freehold Soil Conservation says the borough's responsible to have it. The Borough Construction Office said no. Freehold Soil Conservation District is responsible.
Art, that's under the jurisdiction of the borough, the Bureau of Mines.
I realize.
To say which the borough doesn't have any.
No, it's not. It's absolutely not. Every one of those agencies has said it's the borough's responsibility to have copies of any permits that are issued and to issue the permits.
But that's for the borough council. What we're here tonight is to talk about the
But what I'm
redevelopment
saying
plan.
is you now have a development that nobody has monitored. You have possible potential poisonous soil, and nobody has monitored that.
Hey, but you know, as anything gets developed there, environmental studies are necessary. This is just a plan that's been presented to us of what they want to put there.
Right, but if you accept it, does that mean that Lakeview is not going to go through?
No,
If
we're
you
gonna,
recommend it to
no,
the-
what we're doing tonight, is my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the governing body, the Borough Council, asks us to look at this redevelopment plan that John came and presented to us, for us to provide comment to them. Whether
Okay.
is it consistent with the master plan or is it not consistent with the master plan, and that's what we're gonna do tonight. We're not voting to approve anything. We're just making comments
But
and
if
recommendations.
they- if
We're in-
regardless of your recommendation, then they accept, let's say, the plan that's written, the ordinance that was written that you're looking at, that Councilman Delina signed, because he's in that. Does that mean that if they accept that ordinance, the master plan changes?
I don't know if the Borough Council can change, can they, Council?
Yeah, we just, the planning board just makes recommendation. There's two issues before the planning board this evening. One is the redevelopment plan, we just heard. The second one is the proposed master plan amendments that are part of this presentation. Planning board's obligation is we're just a referral agency. We're not making the final determination as to what's going there. We don't make the final determination as to the actual redevelopment plan. We don't prepare the site plan, the whole application that actually eventually someday comes before this planning board. That's well in the future, where you get to, where we get to address all those things. Our professional staff gets to address all those things. There's environmental studies done before, assuming there's a site plan that has all of these proposals in it. And we will consider it just like any other site plan applications that comes in front of us. There'll be police reports, fire reports generally, planning reports, engineering reports, traffic studies, environmental studies. All those things will be part of that site plan application. So what I'm saying to you is that our function is we don't make the ultimate decision here. We're the planning board. The planning board is, in this capacity, is just a referral agency. These things come from the Borough Council. The Borough Council just wants our recommendations. Is it consistent with the master plan or not? It's really a limited look at what's in front of us. And then they can do one of two things. The Borough Council can accept our recommendations, or they can completely reject them. That only impacts the vote. If we make a recommendation, X, Y, and Z, the council can override that because it's their ultimate legal authority, not ours. What comes before us is the actual plan. Once whatever is there is going to be there, then somebody decides there's a development application, they submit it, we review it, and we do all of the due diligence necessary to ferret out whatever issues we see should be associated with that plan before a decision is made as to what goes there. So it's a long process. But here, just so you know, we're not going to
make the final arbitration, not final arbitration, final decision here. And whatever we say to them, the Borough Council, they can accept it, they can modify it, they can reject it. They can do that.
But wouldn't it be prudent to make some recommendations to them? I understand you're not
They
making
will, the planning
decision.
board has the ultimate authority to do that. They have what's in front of them. There are other issues that could be contained in a recommendation to them. So that may require another meeting because there's a lot of information here. And a lot of good suggestions. And how they get to the Borough Council, of course, would be in the report that we prepare. We just prepare a report. And the report goes up to them. So we're kind of like the investigatory body. We don't make the ultimate decision.
Thank you. Would the public get to see that report?
It's a
As
matter
it's
of-
presented
Public
to
record.
the...
Oh, yes, it's a matter of public record.
Okay. Thank you.
Art,
Yes,
you said that there's work being done on that site right now without permits.
that's correct.
How do you know that?
Because I did an Oprah request, and I got the permits back. The only permits there are the DEP permit, which expired on March the 1st of 2018. And we have no borough permits.
Who controls the permits for that?
The zoning official. Zoning official.
Zoning office?
Zoning official.
Is that right?
Well, if there are issues that arise because you think work is being done there that requires permits and they've either expired or they don't have one, then you need to contact the appropriate building and zoning officials and tell them that that's what's going on, and they'll go out there, investigate, and issue summonses or
Unfortunately, they
stop
won't.
work. We're the planning board. We're
I
not-
have done that over the last 2 years, and the answer was Freehold Soil and Conservation District is doing it. In fact, no, they're not. Jay got the same answer.
Art, we can't help you with that, is what we're
But
trying to say.
I'm just saying, he said I should contact. I'm just wanted on the record that we have contacted them, and they said, no, we're not allowed. They
The
chased
Borough
us off the
Council, the
property.
governing body is the governing body. That's why they're called the governing
Okay.
body. They have to intervene on that.
Well, I know, and they have the same answers, but I will be there also. Thank you again for your time.
Young lady in the back had her hand up.
Hi, my name is Lisa Michelle. I'm with Main Street Townhomes. Hi, my name is Lisa Michelle. I live in Main Street Townhomes.
Can I swear you in, ma'am, please? You have to raise your right hand. You swear the testimony you're about to give the board in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Have you
I-
addressed too, please, for the record?
8 Siler Lane,
That's in Main Street Town?
Main Street Townhomes. So I do want, we do appreciate the purpose that you have here today. I think part of what you're hearing is frustration from the lack of transparency of what's been going on regarding the development in general, potential development from across from Main Street Townhomes, as well as what's going on with the Main Street extension. People, this is an opportunity to be heard, whether or not this is something within your responsibilities or with what you're charged to do here today. Some of that may be news to us, some of it not, but it's an opportunity for us to speak to people that you're making a recommendation that counts for something, otherwise they wouldn't need your recommendation. So it does count. And I think that I understand the history and the contentiousness of what's been going with the property across the way. I understand the need for a base to generate revenue, and there's a big conflict between whether we allow more residential homes in the area and impact our school systems, or whether or how we try and generate some commercial revenue coming in here. I think that this plan is lacks specificity, and I think based on that, there should be a pause, and there needs to be some things that are really vetted here before anyone decides that it's a great idea to put an industrial complex in the middle of a residential neighborhood, because that's really where we are right now. To put it succinctly, the gentleman who wants to develop this property, he snoozed, so he lost. He wants to develop it now. He should have wanted to develop it much earlier, before all the other residential areas have gone up. So he's being cornered by residential properties. We should not have to wake up in the morning and be woken up in the middle of the night to an industrial complex. That's not appropriate. Whether the master plan counts, allows for it or not, then they need to rethink that, because it's not logical to put an industrial complex in the middle of neighborhoods. There are tremendous safety concerns. The traffic circulation issue alone on Main Street is cause enough to put a pause on this and say, this has to be thought through before we say, yes, we think it's okay for there to be warehouse development going up there. The in and out of getting these trucks in and out, that alone is illogical, the way it's being planned right now. No commuter, no worker to this complex is going to take a bus to Sayreville to get to a job. So that's not an option to reduce traffic. That's not going to happen. In order to have that happen, the county or the city or whomever else is going to have to invest in infrastructure to have a reasonable bus come from wherever. In the meantime, if there are going to be 400 jobs here, they should be for Sayreville residents, South Amboy residents, and local residents. Those people shouldn't have to be bussed in from anywhere. There's no park and ride. We don't have a park and ride for the people who commute to New York. We're going to have a park and ride for people to commute to Sayreville. That's not logical. So at the best, this plan should have some specificity, and it should be logical. The traffic issue and how to get these trucks in and out of this complex is a huge issue. And that doesn't solve it. That's what the goal is. The goal was to address the traffic issues on Main Street. This plan does nothing about that but raise more and more questions. And another issue in developing this property is that it should not be compartmentalized from addressing the development of the Main Street extension. They're all part of one. This entire area is one thing, whether there's going to be residential areas going up or commercial areas going up, whether it's the Fulton Landing, whether it's the extension, it's all part of one area that is being besieged with traffic. And safety is a huge issue. A woman crossing the street in Main Street trying to get to the bus was hit by a car about a month ago. About a couple years ago, a woman, the commuters saw her being bounced and bounced from car to car as she got hit and killed as she was getting off the bus. And another person was also struck. So there are these are for adults. More trucks, more cars, and especially addressing the issues with Kimball Drive. Those, under no circumstances should those streets be opened up to anything. There's really a lack of consideration for the people who live there. As the gentleman mentioned, those streets are dependent upon that for parking. Children play in those areas. We already have enough trouble with people coming in and out of our neighborhood using our dumpsters as Fort Grumpy. Now we want to have more strangers coming in and out. I just think there's a huge lack of foresight with the traffic circulation, and I think there's a real lack of consideration for how this is going to impact the quality of life of all of the residential properties around here. And I don't think this is an easy job. We need to generate revenue. We don't want to pay more in property tax, but we don't want a warehouse up in our backyard. So what are we going to do? You have to involve the community, and this has to be sensible. And you have to put our safety first. Thank you.
Anybody else, sir?
Hi, my name is Rick Zenna. I live on Patton Drive, right around the corner.
I need to swear you in, sir. Just raise your right hand. Swear to testimony about to give the board in this matter the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I don't.
Did you say your last name again, Rick, for her?
Zinna, Z-I-N-N-A.
Z-I-N-N-A. Hi, Rick.
A lot of things I was going to bring up have already been addressed about the traffic going down Main Street and the noise from the trucks. The other thing is, you know how nice our roads are now. They're nice and well paved, no potholes. And once we get the weight of these trucks on there, the roads are going to be even worse. Because like right now, you can't go 100 feet without like maneuvering around the potholes, and the trucks are going to create a whole lot more problems with that. The other thing is, I don't understand this bypass road. Like, where does it start? And I had brought this question up before. if people are coming in from South River, how do they get to that bypass road without going through my development? And if these trucks are coming in from this way, I don't know how you're gonna tell a truck you can only come in from the new Parkway exit or coming down this way if the guy's coming in from East Brunswick with a delivery. And it's gonna be around the clock. So we're gonna have a lot of traffic going through this little bit of an area here. We can't move now, like you were saying. You come out there in the morning, it's like a parking lot. The other thing is, like you said about the safety, we don't have, once the Riverton is developed, we don't have enough volunteers on the first aid squad. We can't get volunteers now. We don't have enough schools. I mean, if these people are gonna come here just to work, they might wanna move into town. And we just are gonna be overdeveloped, for one thing. I don't see, I had brought up the question like this fellow did. I had brought up at that Sarah meeting, where's the dirt coming from? Because every day trucks are coming out of Riverton and trucks are going into that area. And I asked if they were one and the same, and somebody said, no, they're not the same trucks. But he just brought up a good point. How do we know? You know, how do we know if it's not the contaminated soil coming out of National Lead? So my question is, with this bypass road, it all sounds good, but how are you going to get to it from this end? You know, where's the end? Where's the beginning of the bypass road? Where's the bypass road start? And where does it go? It can't go along the river because the old powerhouse is there. There's a paper road, right? Where does it start?
Sayville Boulevard, where you go down Sayville Boulevard, it goes past the power plant, goes behind Sheffield Town, Sheffield Muse.
Right, now you're gonna get by
Main Street
River
Town.
Road? How are you gonna get back there? How are you gonna get the trucks back there, behind there? Like, you know, if you come in over the bridge and that paper road, Popowski Street, or what else is back there? What other roads you got to go along behind there? How are you gonna go back there? Where do you start? Where does it start? Where's the bypass road begin at this end of the town? Where's the beginning of the bypass road?
Sayville Boulevard.
That's
You know,
so.
down the end, you know where Town Lake is, there's a light.
Yeah.
You make a right, you're going onto the bypass.
Okay, so but now you got to get there from South River.
Well, it's supposed to go out to, was it Crossman, it terminates at Crossman.
Mr. Chairman, I think this resident's saying from the South River Bridge and Washington Road, how do
Yeah.
you get to the bypass? And then the answer is Main Street and MacArthur,
And then make a
and then
left.
you merge together, and then you get to the bypass once you're over by the Town Lake development. There's
River
not a
Road?
There's not a parallel roadway adjacent to the river, which is what you're talking about, using paper
Right.
streets. That's not proposed. The
Yeah,
bypass
so
begins
we're gonna
from
have,
Town Lake.
this area is gonna be a real zoo, because you're gonna come in from there, Journal Road or Washington Road, and try to get through here to get to the bypass road. And you got St. Stan's over here, Our Lady of Victories. You got all these schools, and you got all this traffic's gonna increase. There's gotta be another entrance. There's gotta be another way to get there. You know, maybe where the old Sayville restaurant was, and go down there, Weber, you know, that's gone. Make the road back there to get to it. You know, I don't know. You know, I don't want to see all that traffic coming through this area here. You know, we got kids running around here too. You got the sports complex right here. You know, I mean, it's where all the kids congregate. That's where all the teams are playing. You know, what are you going to do with that? It's like, you know, we're asking for trouble, bringing in this much, especially 53-foot containers. The weight of those things, you know, they're 40,000 pounds. You know, the roads can't handle the weight. The roads can't handle the traffic. You know, I don't know. Tell me something.
Oh.
Somebody.
Bypass road is not part of what we're talking about tonight. The bypass is part of the Riverton complex that's going to finish that process, and that's not before us tonight. What we're looking at tonight is just this plan, and to provide to the council what our thoughts are about it. And as you've heard from some of our comments, we have a concern about the traffic circulation.
Yeah, yeah.
And the master plan
I
notes
got it,
that.
like, just running this area alone. I know where you're going to go through down there, but like I said, just getting to that.
Understand,
area,
Rick, it's
you know?
going to be an issue, there's no doubt.
So, yeah, no, okay, well, thanks for hearing it.
Yeah, absolutely, Rick. Thank you.
Gary Latanzi, 4 Gwizdak Court, Sayreville,
Say that again,
Main
sir?
Street Townhomes.
Okay. you got it.
Gary Latanzi.
Okay.
All right, I gotta swear you in, sir. You swear the testimony about to give the board in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. 4 Gwizdak Court, Main Street Townhomes. I wasn't going to speak, but just mention something about this gentleman here mentioned something about the bypass road and having to do with Rivington. I've been on the Mayor's Advisory Committee for the bypass road for several years, and prior to that, I was just a spectator going to meetings when other people were involved, and Jay also knows me, along with Art. And we were told initially that the Main Street bypass, the bypass road will have nothing to do with the point, which when it was called the point. And now I'm hearing that it's going to have something to do with Rivington. And again, it comes down to the issue of safety in Main Street. We're being told that Kimball Drive East will be the main thoroughfare, and that means trucks and cars coming from Sayreville Boulevard, behind Sheffield, Sayreville Boulevard. There's an existing road there already, but there also is a road that isn't developed, Bohmhurst, and that has to all be cut through to make the development of this bypass road.
Yep.
And our concern is our community is an ungated private community. I'm initial owner since 1985. It is my understanding, and I remember this, that we had access to those 2 roads initially. The master plan has been in effect since the 70s and 80s. We gave the roads back to the borough in 1993 or 94. This was never discussed at the time. So, in essence, it may not be part of what you have to hear, but I guess the Borough Council will hear it come the next meeting. So I just want to have that on the record.
Sure.
Our main concern is that bypass road should not have anything to do with Rivington unless it extends down to 9 and 35 Chevalier. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Sir. Anybody else? Yeah.
Ma'am, you want to raise your right hand? Swear the testimony you're about to give the board in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Camilla Serengioni, Main Street Townhomes. Camilla Serengioni, Main Street Townhomes, 21 Moulton Court. The only thing, everything today was very well said by everybody here today. I was actually inspired by a couple of people that sent out flyers in my neighborhood. And I just want to say that I've been living in Main Street Townhomes for about 13 years now. I have 2 boys, a 10 and a 12-year-old. And my thing is, what in logic would put a warehouse in front of all of these properties? You have all these residential properties, and now you're going to put a warehouse right there. I mean, imagine, would any of you like to go outside and see warehouses and trucks day in and day out? I mean, think about it. I mean, I'm talking about a human perspective, because everything that was said today with the project was all about money. And all I hear is money, finances. Nothing was said about the quality of life today. So I think that should be taken into consideration. So please do that, okay? I have a 10 and a 12-year-old, 13 years in Sayreville. Traffic is horrendous as is. I'm a teacher, can't get to work on time sometimes because I can't get through Main Street. Coming back, the same thing. I mean, please, guys, take this into consideration. You cannot have a warehouse in front of all these communities with people. Where's our quality of life? Where's that? Or is money more important? Think about it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's your ordinance.
Ed, ma'am.
I'm Marcia Peters, and I'm at 20 Fern Court. I'm in the Park Village townhouses.
All right, you need to raise your hand again, because that ain't...
I do?
You swear the testimony you're about to give the board in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you
Nothing
God?
but the truth. Yes, I do. So I've heard everybody tonight. Nobody spoke from Park Village, so I'm speaking on behalf of the Park Village residents because the area that's on this map is right next to my court in particular. My house is right there. Fern Court is right on this map. So one of my major concerns is safety and the noise level. Safety first, because this is a big establishment. It's a lot of people. And you're talking about shrubs and all of this, but that's not like a fence. So people can come over, you know, right now, to get to that area, I can just walk over here too. So there's no kind of barrier. So safety for me with all these workers coming in on buses and what have you, as you spoke about, is a concern because I live alone. I don't know if I should say that, but I do. And I'm already thinking when I saw this notice that I have to get some bars on my window at the side because, you know, when I go upstairs to bed, you know, anything can happen. So I'm concerned when the gentleman brought up about the fire, I never even thought about that, but that's another concern because I'm right there. So it's very important that this board recommends in our favor because as everybody said, the quality of life, we have children, I do have grandkids, my kids grew up there, but I have grandkids that come and visit, and I'm concerned, as everybody else, about the quality of life. I'm also concerned about the property value going down. Okay, thank you.
Mike?
My name is Michael Diadio. I'm the chairman of the Sayreville Economic Redevelopment Agency, and I live at 13 Zaleski Drive.
You want to raise your right hand?
You want to swear me in?
Yes.
Why do you do that, actually? When I sat on this board,
I like to do it, and I think the municipal land use law specifically says that any witnesses that come before the planning board should be sworn.
all right, because I'm not actually testifying, but I'll tell the truth, so.
Well, kind of, you kind of are. I think anybody comes at a podium essentially from the public is
So I swear
testifying.
to tell the truth.
Swear the testimony you're about to give the board in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do. I just want to make something clear to the members of the public, Mr. Chairman, if I may. Right now, and with all the litigation that's been going on, this builder tomorrow can build 3 warehouses with over 600,000 square feet. He can also build 207 4-bedroom homes, and he doesn't need to appear before a board for approval or anything. He just has to present plans. So you're going to have truck traffic, whether or not this board decides anything tonight, and no matter what the council decides. That's done. We lost. You've been to court over the years. We spent $1.2 million of our taxpayer money, and we lost. The plan now is, rather than have 207 4-bedroom homes with over 400 kids, and Mr. Maganone, you sat on the Board of Ed, you know how that would decimate your budget, okay? I don't know what it is now, $12,000 a kid?
At least.
All right, so you're talking $4.5 million? Can we afford that? Can anybody in this room afford their taxes going up 20%? I know I can't. I'm already paying over $11,000 in taxes. You live a block away from me, I know you are. Our only alternative is to make the 3 warehouses bigger. That eliminates 207 4-bedroom homes, probably 2 cars for every house, which is 414 cars on the road. Yes, you're going to have more trucks, but we don't have 414 cars, and our taxes won't go up. I'm the chairman of the Sayreville Economic Redevelopment Agency. My job is to bring revenue into this town. This plan will bring a positive cash flow into our town. Secondly, he doesn't own Main Street. He's willing, and I didn't see this plan yet, so let me make that perfectly clear. And Council, you were almost right. The plan, before it comes to the planning board, comes through the Sayreville Economic Redevelopment Agency. We approve it. We look at the plans. We'll make suggestions. We'll make the deals. We'll look at the buffering. And by the way, I do like the idea of a fence that this woman brought up, so I'll see what I can do when it comes to the agency. But we need the cash flow. We can't afford to have $4.5 million added to the Board of Ed budget. Yes, some people are going to be inconvenienced. We're not going to be able to hide the warehouses through buffering. We'll do our best when it comes to the agency to make it look nice. It'll bring some jobs to the borough. I don't believe anybody's going to take a bus there. We're going to have to make sure they have enough parking. You know, we'll do the best we can. But this is what we're stuck with. This is our choice. 3 warehouses, 207 homes, $4.5 million added to the Board of Ed budget, or 3 bigger warehouses, positive cash flow, and maybe our taxes will be stable or go down a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Ma'am.
Ma'am, we're not gonna have that kind of
You can have that conversation out after the meeting. Okay. Okay, but that.
Ma'am? She's out of order. She's out of
Ma'am,
order.
okay. Guys, you could have that conversation. Mr. Diato is very visible in town. You could have that conversation with him outside. I just want to conduct a meeting. We still have another issue related to this that we have to cover. John, I appreciate your patience. Does anybody need to take a 2-minute break? Yeah. Anybody else from the public? I'm going to open it up again after John's presentation, but from this point now, we'll close the public. John, if you can summarize pretty quickly your next thing.
So, the,
Ladies and gentlemen, we still got to conduct a meeting. Thank you. I know it's late. It's a work night. I appreciate your patience.
The other item that we're here to talk about this evening is connected, and I essentially talked about it while I was presenting the redevelopment plan.
You did, but I wanted you to be a little.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm just not going to belabor the point. This is, I prepared what is essentially a clarification document in my mind that addresses some of the loose ends that were in the 2013 Sayreville master plan. Loose ends not by virtue of omission or error, just because circumstances have changed regarding the litigation. So I talked about this document that I prepared clarifies that the intent of the master plan is to have a special economic development district on the Mako tract for future land use. And then it talks about what I talked about earlier with the connector road, the north-south between Main Street and Washington Road from Lakeview Drive, and the idea that the circumstances changed from when that was initially proposed, from when it was discussed in the 1998 master plan. At that time, as I said, there was the residential land use on one side, the commercial industrial land use on the other side. And now with the 2013 master plan and the further clarification that the entire tract is to be a special economic development district, or this redevelopment plan in effect, that because of the different nature of the traffic, because of the different nature of the land uses, that the connector at that point was not as appropriate as it once was, and to clarify that it not be required as a master plan road between Lakeview Drive and Washington Road in the south and Main Street in the north. That's it. And it's, like I said, we talked about this already in the presentation.
Basically, so what you're suggesting is that you have a draft change to our master plan to eliminate that north-south extension for this piece of property.
Right, and the way I look at it is it's answering that question that was left unanswered as left pending litigation in the 2013 plan. This provides an answer that the board may or may not agree with, but I'm presenting it to you this evening.
I think our issue is I see the number of vehicles traveling on that connector by the people that work there would be very similar to a resident development, number of traffic, and, you know, I think that's just a necessary requirement. You know, you're a professional planner, so you understand we have a master plan, and I'm unfamiliar with any type of planning that you would develop a master plan and then change it to accommodated development. You know, it just doesn't sound prudent planning to me. I think when you look at the overall circulation of the traffic flow within the borough, we need that north-south connector. And I think, I don't know if the board agrees with me, but I think that's what our comments to the governing body needs to be, is that John made a nice presentation tonight, we understand it, but it's not consistent with the master plan. And I think that's a significant issue that needs to be resolved somehow. I don't see the planning board recommending that we change our master plan to accommodate a development that's not in compliance with it. That's just my opinion, but I'm interested to hear from my fellow board members.
Well, I think before you start making those, Jeff, what is it you want? You're raising your hand out there. We're in the middle of this.
Mr. Chairman, there's one thing that you're saying that I want to just read to you from the master plan. My name is Jeff Lehrer from the law firm Defense.
Which master plan? You talking the 98, Jeff?
I'm sorry?
You got the 98 master plan you want to read?
1998 master plan. I direct your attention to Roman numeral 4, page 25. This is, you made this statement, Mr. Chairman. The statement was made, I believe, it was you, Mr. Chairman, if I'm not mistaken, that there's a requirement for the extension of Lakeview Drive to Washington. The way that the report reads, and I'm going to read the words, it says, the borough has plans for future Washington/Main connectors at the following locations. Lakeview Drive, that's number 1, dash. This roadway segment off of Washington Avenue could be extended northward to intersect Main Street to Kaplan Chevalier property, etc. So it doesn't say shall, it doesn't say must, it doesn't say should, it says could. And so I believe that over the years there's been this misunderstanding that the Lakeview Drive extension is a requirement. And I've seen it time and time again in reports from your professionals. And I have consistently argued, and even in court, that it's not a mandate. It's a could, and it's not a mandate. So there's this misunderstanding that it says that when people say it's required, it's a should, you must do this. That's not what the words actually say, Mr. Chairman, with all due respect. That's all I really have to say.
Anybody else? 13 just references that it's in the 1998 master plan. It's on litigation, yeah.
Yes,
If I may, I'll
Kind
read
of
the...
took that out of turn. Can we finish with your presentation there?
I'll, just for the boards, just for clarity, page CP8 of the 2013 master plan, this is in the circulation element, references the Main Street Washington Road connector. It says proposed in the 1998 master plan. This proposed connector from Main Street south to Lakeview Drive to Washington Road is still in litigation in regard to the Mako Tract. Legal conclusions are expected sometime in 2013. So, only 6 years late, but that's why I say that it's discussed, but it's left open. It's in the 2013 plan. And you heard what Mr. Lara had to say, and I'll leave it to the board to deliberate.
Okay, we've heard comments. Any comments from the board on the master plan amendment?
Just, I understand that where we're coming from as far as this basically being thrown at us. But at the same token, I think a practical approach needs to be taken as far as traffic safety and practicality of ingress and egress of trucks of this nature and the traffic in this section leaving this site to the Main Street extension. I understand we deal with the bypass and the Lakeview thing for safety reasons. That could be a possibility on our end as far as approving it if it becomes a safety issue for emergency vehicles. But I think a recommendation to the council as far as taking a practical approach and even a study as far as widening the Main Street road from Crossman down to the extension. Because something has to be done with the volume of traffic that's in this area now and what it's going to be.
Anybody else? Open up for the public again, please. At this time, open up for the public for any comments on what John just talked about. Sir?
Again, Gary Latanzi for Gwizdak Court, Sayreville, New Jersey. I
We
already
already swore you
testified.
in, so you're still under oath, sir.
Something quickly, just a little rebuttal on the record from Mr. Adio, talking about 400 homes as opposed to large warehouses. Number one, are there going to be any tax abatements for these warehouses as we've done on the Main Street extension? And number two, 400 homes is going to generate taxes. They're going to be paying taxes on those homes. So I'm not a financial wizard, but if you have taxes on homes, we all pay taxes on our homes. I'd rather have homes with children and quality of life as to trucks and tractors and noise, and it will be a balance in terms of the number of homes that will be built and the taxes that will be generated from those homes and those families. So, in contradiction to what you say, Mr. Adio, you know, I appreciate, in all due respect, but it's a wash. It's a catch-22, if you look at it. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Just in summary, a couple of things. There's been a lot of talk about poison.
Jeff, can you just identify who you represent and
I
your
represent,
appearance? Let me just finish.
Sure.
And your appearance in this matter, because you keep coming up to the podium and we don't know what's going on.
Well, I'm here now to talk about the master plan amendment. I think that's what you're talking about now. You've opened it up to the public. So I represent Fulton's Landing Incorporated, which is the owner of, is the applicant that had filed the application for the western portion of the property. I also represent the Mako interests. So if you want me to be sworn, I'm going to.
No, I'm not going to swear you in. No, you are here in a representative capacity.
Yes.
Even though you don't have a client sitting in here, it's, you know.
That's correct.
You're involved in the litigation. You represent plaintiff. And I think everybody should understand, you know,
Right.
who you are and what you're doing. And
Right.
certainly, you know, we'll be more than happy to hear your comments as long as they stay away from the litigation and the mediation.
Absolutely, absolutely. There's just, and I had no intention of talking about the litigation whatsoever. We've all know the history. There has been a lot of talk by, and I've listened very carefully about the poisonous soil, the truck traffic. All of this that you're talking about, they're legitimate concerns. I'm not going to diminish them. I'm not going to minimize them. But what we're here really to talk about is a master plan amendment that will effectuate a warehouse use. I appeared here 8 years ago and got an approval for about 600,000 square feet of warehouse space. This is merely an extension of that. The SED2 didn't do exactly what my client wanted. So, but it's close. What you're proposing now is relatively close. So that was something that this planning board had approved a long time ago, many years ago. But it was not exactly what my client wanted. But a lot of these issues will be dealt with through Sarah in terms of site design. It will be dealt with by you as part of site plan approval. My client will sit down with your professionals. We'll go through the plans. We'll address the lighting. We'll address the buffering. We'll address the sidewalk that Mr. Leon Cavella talked about. We'll address all of the truck traffic issues that you have concerns about. We'll address buffering. We'll address everything. A lot of what I'm hearing tonight is really site plan issues. The core of what the board is here for tonight is, do you want to amend your master plan to be consistent with the redevelopment plan that's been prepared by Hiring Gruhl on behalf of the borough? That's really the question. And if you do, then you can say, yes, our master plan, which we prepare, is consistent with the redevelopment plan. The master plan will then be consistent with the redevelopment plan ordinance that's presented to the governing body. That's the simple issue that you have. So I don't want the public to misunderstand that doing this by the board means that it's over. It's not. It's not even close to being over. There's lots to do. We will sit and we will work with your professionals. We always have, and we always will. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just two simple questions.
Sir, you're still under oath.
Hmm?
You're still under oath.
Yes.
Your name again, sir?
Ed Little.
Yeah, who's the first gentleman?
Is a very small name.
I get it.
Well, as you know, I'm more concerned. I know this is going to go through, both of them. Once again, just concerned about the safety and the destruction of Main Street townhomes. Because if it goes the way that we've heard up through Kimball Drive, that's destroying a community. And I'd like you to just keep thinking about that. And I appreciate that.
Thank you.
And the question is, who do I talk to about finding out about the water level and the streams underneath the house and whether I'm getting flooded out?
Construction office in the borough.
Oh, when I call them up, they never answer the phone.
Visit him. Kurt Mick's always available.
Okay, thank you.
Rick? Yeah, just. He's a good guy,
So Rick Zenner, still under oath. Regardless of, and I don't understand what he was saying about they don't need permission or permit. I thought only utility companies didn't have to get permits to do things. At any time a contractor wanted to do something, they had to get permits and approval. So I don't understand what he was saying about it. He doesn't need that. The other thing was, regardless of if you do houses or factories or warehouses down there, the road's still going to get widened, right? Even regardless of what's going down there, because there's still going to be increased traffic.
I think part of the roadway improvements are part of.
Yes, so regardless of what goes down there, right? Now, of course, now this will probably be the Board of Education. If it winds up being homes there and homes in what used to be the Point, there's got to be more schools. There's got to be another school, correct? And that would be something that, I don't know, you addressed that, the Board of Education addressed that, the council
There's all
addressed
studies that will be done to look at the age of children with schools. I mean, that's beyond our ability here to even comment.
Yeah, okay. I was just curious. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick.
Yeah, I'm going to put you guys on the spot. Appreciate it.
If there's not anybody else, I'm going to close the public portion. Close the public portion. Okay. Need a motion? Anybody? Okay, everybody in favor?
Second.
Okay, what are we going to do, guys? At hand here is we have to make a recommendation to the governing body on the Fulton Landing redevelopment plan.
Just to make a little comment here, I have generally prepared a resolution that says there's a yes and then there's a slash that says no in it. So in contemplation that some people may have various opinions, but this resolution is very basic. It does not include many of the recommendations that the members of the board indicated this evening. So if anybody wants those recommendations included, this resolution can't be adopted tonight. So if you want them in there, we can compile them. You can give a list of those, but they have to be consistent with what's been on the record. So either Beth gets them from the transcript here, which is probably going to be very lengthy and very expensive, or the tape, and then I could draft that resolution, or we can have a basic one here and just call it a temporary resolution, and then I can make it a final after I either get a hold of the transcript or I get a copy of the minutes. But we're having a meeting on the 15th. So it's a week away that if you didn't feel comfortable with this resolution, we could, not act down this resolution tonight, call it a temporary, or wait until the 15th.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Doctor.
To say.
You talking to the microphone?
Yes, I thought I was. I apologize. First, I'd like to say that I take offense to the attorney that said that this is a simple issue for us. Because I really feel strongly that there are a myriad of issues that were raised tonight. With that being said, to council, I strongly suggest that what was discussed tonight, as it is in alignment, should be included in that document.
Dr. Mantella is making a suggestion that we include into this resolution some of the comments we talked about. You talked about the connector.
Right, there was a myriad of issues.
Well, it'd be a compilation of recommendations, but the issue with that is that you may not all agree on some of those recommendations. So somehow I'd have to have them compiled, and somehow we have to vote on what it is you want to tell the borough governing body. In a document called resolution/report.
I believe that the intelligence on this board can make a concise, clear.
Since we're all here.
Yeah. You can tell me what they are now, because they're fresh in your mind, we can go one by one.
Hold on, John, go ahead.
If I may, sorry to interrupt.
Oh, go ahead, John.
Just for procedural purposes, should we address the issue of the master plan amendment prior to discussion of the recommendations regarding the plan, the redevelopment plan?
Well, technically, I guess that's correct.
Well, because
But at the end of the day, they're both here. We're both considering them in tandem.
Oh, that's a good idea.
But that's fine.
No, I like that idea.
Yeah, just for, what are we being consistent with?
Yeah, he's suggesting that we make a decision on the amendment of the master plan to eliminate the requirement or the mention about the north-south connector through Lakeview.
Well, it's consistent with the two-page, the higher Gruel report.
Right, that's what he talked about.
Yes. And then you can,
So once we make a decision on that, then that will either not, or will be, or won't be a recommendation in the
that's fine.
recommendation, so.
Yep.
So, Mr. Logan?
Question, Chairman. The items that I brought up about the traffic and the ingress, egress to the site, I realize that's part of a site plan application, but could we add that to this, or is that?
You can, as it relates to the redevelopment plan,
Yeah.
you got to make a decision on the redevelopment plan, and the statute says, and any other recommendations you deem appropriate.
You see, the traffic does affect the redevelopment plan.
Right, you can make them. You can make those recommendations. You could say, well, I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but if you felt that, the Fulton Landing redevelopment plan was something that you were prepared to recommend, subject to Borough Council considering the following issues: traffic, circulation, buffering, whatever.
Okay, well, I would like to add what we talked about as far as the traffic.
Well, we will, but
Absolutely.
but the first thing, Mr. Logan, is making a decision on whether we want to amend the master plan.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So by saying, yes, we're going to amend the master plan in accordance with the papers in front of us, that's absolutely taking off the connector.
Well, that's what this is based on.
That's what
the
this is,
purpose
right?
of this, yeah.
Okay. Well, when he had got up, it almost seemed like it was still in
It's John's
So basically-
testimony that that's not required anymore because there won't be a residential piece. Am I correct?
Essentially, that's correct, but it's this
But that's
board,
really
it's
just a
this board's
matter of-
decision to make, because the planning,
I mean, everything we discussed tonight,
right.
it's linked, exactly. In other words, if I think everybody's right, no one's taking buses, no one's doing that, but if you could restrict just car use through this side, and the trucks are over here along with cars, it might be able to divide it to make it a little lighter on both ends instead of one big
Well,
cluster.
then what we need to do is either approve or not approve this, so I'll take a motion, and then we'll take a vote. Motion is to approve.
I hate to take it off the table, not that it would.
Well, even if you a tendency not to approve this, you can make a motion and just call the vote, and let the vote say.
Or you could vote to approve it, subject to deleting whatever offends you.
We're subject to still
Right.
having a discussion on it. I don't know if I'm pro or for at this point, depending on how they build it. but
Right, because you're just.
I hate to take something off the table when it's not even fruition yet. You might need it later, so why take it off?
Of course.
Versus warehouse?
No, no. It's not before us. We're making recommendations on the plan that includes the warehouse.
But we're paving the way because we're
That's where-
allowing all the.
This is what you're making a recommendation to the Borough Council about. This plan comes from the Borough Council reviewing hiring rule, draft a plan, and the amendments associated with it that make this plan consistent with your master plan.
But that couldn't move forward without us amending this because this is allowing,
Well,
we're rezoning for all the commercial
That's true. You always want to have your master plan to be consistent with your ordinances and your redevelopment plans. Sometimes they're, I don't know of any situation where they're not, but they can be. But there has to be a really good reason for that to happen. You have stuff in your master plan and ordinances don't properly implement the design plan. That's what the master plan is. It's a design plan for your town. And the ordinances implement those concepts. So you don't want your master plan to say blue and you're adopting ordinances to say white. You want them to be consistent. And there's all sorts of legal ramifications when they're not.
Again, if we want to vote on this, I'll entertain a motion. What's that? Can't hear you, Mr. Veloso.
I'm confused. I think we need a little more time to think about what we're
Can't hear you.
voting on.
Says he's confused, he needs.
Want to hold over till the 15th.
You want to make a motion to table it then?
Motion to hold this over until the 15th.
Well, then you make a motion.
So moved.
Motion to table.
I need a second.
Second.
Second, then you have to have a
Roll
vote.
call vote. And then a roll call vote to
Table
table
to when? Table to when? The 15th?
next meeting. The resolution and report of the Planning Board of the Borough of Sayville, Middlesex County, New Jersey, recommending the addendum to the 2013 Borough of Sayville Master Plan.
Hold on, just time out. Come on back here, John, and talk. 'Cause I'm not really good at reading lips.
Regardless, is a motion to table.
Too many open
And we'll vote tomorrow. But you vote on this, and it's all
things, or at least out.
this. That's cut off me. Say thank you. You go.
Hey, Mike, this all comes down to just eliminating that connector road on Lakeview Drive, right?
Do we want to do that? That's the question.
I think from a state point of view, yes, it's important.
Zoning to allow warehouse.
No, what we're doing is we're changing the master plan to accommodate the redevelopment plan. It should be the other way around.
To accommodate
Redevelopment.
the warehouse.
It should be the other way around. Well, what's going on?
All right, so, I guess there was a concern, everybody needs to understand that these are two separate issues. In the redevelopment plan, you have the proposed amendments to the master plan. And so, each one of those has to be dealt with separately. So if we're going to table those two things, by the way, they both require specific kinds of public notice that's in the newspaper, so I don't want to run afoul of any time periods associated with
I say we just call a vote on approving this or not.
Yeah, because I have some issues with public notice and whether or not that, because they have different, it's not like hearing an application. When you hear an application, you decide you want to carry it, the people who are here, you just tell them, okay, we're going to carry it to the next meeting date, and you don't have to require new notice. But, things are different with ordinance changes and master plan amendments and things of that nature. Jeff, you want to talk about any of that? Yeah, but I don't need you to say it that way, because I know you think you know
Just
everything.
legally, you have a master plan amendment before you. You vote yes. You can vote yes on the land use element. You can vote no on the circulation plan element, or you can vote yes on both. Then you have to make the decision, is it consistent with the master plan, what the plan proposes? That's where, and it's Mantilla?
It's Mantilla, properly, yes.
Mrs. Mantilla is correct, where you can say, we find that this redevelopment plan is inconsistent with, or is consistent with the master plan, but we recommend the following. And you can list them, you're right, but there's two choices you have. There's two decisions. The first, the master plan amendment, and you can bifurcate that. You can split it in half on the circulation element and on the land use element, if that's what you want to do. If you want to vote on it as a whole, vote on it as a whole. But then there's a second issue, which is, Now that we've done that, is the plan, this document, is it consistent with the master plan? And if the answer is yes, it is, but we have the following recommendations, then
I would defer to our professionals on what the protocol should be.
I believe that we take a vote on the master plan amendment first. Either approve it or not approve it, and that will drive what your recommendation are going to be with the redevelopment plan.
No, sir, no, sir.
I know.
Hang on.
We understand. Well, we're not open to the public.
We're not gonna do this. Because he's an attorney and listen, you asked, you're gonna yell at me? Well, that's not happening.
Let's everybody calm down. We got a motion to table on the floor. We had a second. Now, we want to continue the table, or you can rescind that motion and we can take a vote on this. A second? Everybody's in favor of rescinding that motion? Okay, so we come back to the same issue. We have the addendum to the master plan. You're going to vote yes on it or vote no on it. If you
Or
want
any
to
part of-
separate it,
any
you want to
part of it.
separate it and say the first part, the land use element, you could approve or not approve, and same thing for the circulation. Our issue that we've been talking about has to deal with the circulation plan element. Does everybody understand where we're coming from? Everybody understand what we're doing?
This is,
Right. Right, which would basically eliminate,
Make a recommendation
right,
that the circulation element be modified. Except this part. That's for recommendation.
If I may chime in, in this case, we were talking before about the recommendation, the referral. In this case, it's not a recommendation, it's your plan, it's your action to take. So it's either you amend it, or you amend part of it, or you don't amend it.
Right, the master
So
plan's
no one
not a
else is gonna
referral.
do anything with
Master
it
plan's
after
our
that.
bag.
That's yours to do with.
and this amendment is specific to the Mako property. And that's
well, that's the
what we're
genesis
doing.
of it. That's the genesis. So we're back to the same thing. Either want to approve this or not approve this. Make a motion, call the vote.
I make a motion, we approve.
Okay, Councilman made a motion to approve the addendum to the master plan. Need a second?
Second.
Okay, you got a motion, and I got a second, and I need a roll call vote. This is, again, an up or down vote on the amendment to the Borough Master Plan.
Mr. Herkevich?
Yes.
Councilman Delina?
Yes.
Mr. Davis? Mr. Kelly? Mr. McEnoon?
No.
Ms. O'Leary?
No.
Mr. Velosin?
No.
Ms. Montilla?
No.
No.
Yep, didn't pass.
Okay, now we have the redevelopment plan. Recommendations to make to the council. Obviously, one of them is going to be, it's inconsistent with the master plan.
Yeah.
Circulation plan. You take a motion for that?
Yep. I mean, yeah, I mean, this is the referral issue, so, you know, make a motion, second it, and have a vote on whether or not you think, you know, the redevelopment plan is,
Consistent with the master
and you
plan.
recommend it, or you don't recommend it because X.
So we'll take a motion to either approve or not approve the
At this point, we
development plan.
can't because
per se.
it doesn't fit into the zoning now.
It's a different issue.
Yep. Council? What's your recommendation, how to word it? That's the question.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the
He
question.
wants, Mr. Vlosin's questioning the best way to word the motion.
Just say, if you're in favor of the plan, you recommend that the Borough Council, let me finish. You recommend adoption of the Fulton Landing redevelopment plan, subject to whatever issue you have, that the circulation plan be reviewed, because you don't like the way it's planned out, or it's there's not sufficient information for you to make a decision on
Can
the
we-
circulation
Can we
plan.
just make a vote to whether it's consistent or not with the master plan?
That's all your function is. But the statute also says, "and any other recommendations you deem appropriate." The first function is to determine whether or not the redevelopment plan, that's all you're doing, is telling the Borough Council that you recommend the proposed plan that has been drafted from Hiram Grove,
Or that we don't recommend it because it's
Or that you-
inconsistent with the master plan,
or for any other reason.
which would be consistent in our last vote.
You could do that.
Want to make the recommendation to approve the redevelopment plan, and with the recommendation that the circulation plan be modified to include the bike.
Is that a motion?
Right, yeah, that's my
You
motion.
want to repeat that again?
That the Fulton Landing redevelopment plan be approved with the recommendation that the circulation plan element be reviewed by the borough for the connector road at Lakeview.
That's the motion.
Isn't that what we were saying?
Everybody understand that?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
Is your mic on?
Can't we just make a motion to say that the plan is inconsistent with the master
Say
plan?
it's not consistent with the master plan.
Yes.
I think what we do is we just notify the council, we take a vote to notify the council that the redevelopment plan as presented us to this evening is, we believe is inconsistent with the master plan, and we mentioned due to the circulation issue.
Well, you could approve it even though it's inconsistent.
That's inconsistent.
Of course.
If I may, it's not a approval or denial.
No, it's not approval. It's whether-
I'm using the word approval, it's really a recommendation.
Right, it's a recommendation. And what I'm hearing, not to butt in too much, but there's obviously an issue with the circulation plan element that's going to be reflected in whatever the board does tonight. So it's a matter of whether the board thinks otherwise it's consistent. I think that it can be, the land use element is fairly clear in my opinion, and I would just ask the board to consider that part of it.
I don't think it's appropriate to approve or disapprove this, it's just a motion to let the council know that we believe the planning board says this is inconsistent with the master plan, and then to identify why.
Is that your motion?
We okay with that? Mr. Voloshin? Al, what you got?
Is that your motion?
What's the motion?
We make a motion that we,
I lost that because I was talking to,
I believe the motion should be that we notify the council, that it's the planning board's opinion that the redevelopment plan for this parcel is inconsistent with the master plan.
yeah, it's inconsistent with the master plan as currently constituted.
Okay, I'll make that.
Make that motion?
That way, yeah.
Everybody understand that motion?
Yes.
And we need a second?
Second.
Okay,
You didn't hear it? You need to come up front.
So, just so I'm clear,
No, not here, just sit closer.
Good, Councilman.
we're voting on
Keep having
the fact, just before the amendments that we wanted to make to the master plan, we voted, the board voted down. So what we're going to vote for now is saying, because we voted that down, now that the document that's in front of us, obviously that's going to be voted down because it is inconsistent because we didn't adopt the other amendments. Is that correct?
I follow that logic, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second, need a vote.
Mr. Herkevich, we had a second.
Yes.
Mr. Herkevich?
Yes.
Councilman Delina?
Yes?
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly? Mr. McEnone? Ms. O'Leary?
Yes.
Mr. Voloshin? Ms. Montia?
Yes.
Approved, or recommendation.
You got that?
I got it.
And highlight the circulation. John, thank you for your time and patience this evening.
you have anything else on the agenda?
Um,
I'll finish that up.
Okay, continue with the agenda. Any old business, new business? We have a letter from the clerk. Who wants to handle this? Letter dated 10 April, 23 April, as we all talked about? Okay. All right.
We have other resolutions, don't we?
Nope.
Nothing? Oh, none of those were done.
Yeah, we have the resolution 2019-121 to appropriate funds and bonds in the event of a shortfall in funding for the borough's affordable housing programs. And the resolution number 2019, -122, adopting the affirmative marketing plan for the borough of Saraville.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we have two resolutions that we need to consider. Council?
But these are resolutions that were sent from Borough Council to the Planning Board to approve. Now, normally, there are ordinances or things of that nature, but these are resolutions to appropriate funds or bonds in the event of a shortfall in funding for the borough's affordable housing programs. The second one is 2019-122, adopting the affirmative marketing plan for the borough of Saraville. These are, again, there's a provision in the land use law about any capital projects have to be referred to the planning board for any comment. These are really just resolutions that we're going to do that, and so one.
Vote on them together?
No, you got to vote on them separately.
If anybody has an issue, I'll take a motion to approve Resolution 2019-121.
Make a motion, we approve.
I need a second. Second. Need a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Urkevich? Councilman Delana?
Yes.
Mr. Davis? Mr. Kelly? Mr. McEnone?
Yes.
Ms. O'Leary?
Yes.
Mr. Velosan? Ms. Mantilla? Approved.
Okay, next resolution, 2019-122, adopting the affirmative marketing plan for the borough of Saraville. Need the motion to approve that.
Make a motion, we approve.
Need a second? Need a roll call vote.
Mr. Urkevich? Councilman Delana?
Yes.
Mr. Davis? Mr. Kelly? Mr. McEnone?
Yes.
Ms. O'Leary?
Yes.
Mr. Velosan? Ms. Mantilla? Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, our next meeting is next week, May 15th. I have two things on the agenda, Jay. Is this, plus we had one that was moved from tonight, right?
That's on there, Mr. Chairman.
That's on, okay.
You have a review of a proposed school addition of the existing school on Cheesequake Road. They're coming in to make a presentation for, just to let you know what the proposal is. And then the other one is the amendments to the redevelopment plan that were on for this evening that were carried till next week. So those are the two items on the agenda.
And that's why we carried it, because it's 10 after 10, we figured we wouldn't even get to them.
Take a motion for adjournment.
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Members of the public, thank you for coming and sitting here today. Appreciate your time, okay?
Well, you know what, I'm a dead man. I'm a dead man walking. In our case, in our litigation.
Why?
Dead man.
Why? Well,
Hey.
well, it doesn't make sense we're not allowed to talk about it. How are you supposed to vote on something if I can't talk about it and ask questions?
Yes.
Nobody voted yes.
No, it's not,
you
we're
didn't
not
turn it
approving
down.
it. What we just, the borough council.
Saying that it's not.
No, it would have been if you approved the master plan, but you didn't. So now,
Why couldn't we move the land use portion of it and make the recommendation? That's what I said.
you could have done that, because at the end of
But
the day,
I
that's
did
what it
say.
was.
That's exactly what he was saying.
Yep.
Let me explain something to you.
Like they
Let me
couldn't
explain
understand
something.
what I was saying. When have we ever
Yeah. I don't have the transcript.
He said that the master plan says, then why do you want us to amend it?